I'm Sarah Mitchell, 29, and for 3 years, my husband and I saved every penny for our dream of starting a family. We'd cut back on everything, no vacations, no fancy dinners, even skipping our daily coffee runs. That baby fund was our sacred promise to our future child, growing slowly but steadily to nearly $47,000. Then came the morning I logged into our savings account and saw a balance of zero. Just like that, 3 years of sacrifice gone, my hands trembled as I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. David had always handled our finances, and I trusted him completely. But when I confronted him, his explanation didn't add up. The truth about where that money went would shatter everything I thought I knew about the man I married. What I discovered next wasn't just about stolen dreams, it was about a web of lies that ran deeper than I ever imagined. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of the greatest betrayal. If you've ever felt that gut-wrenching moment when trust crumbles, subscribe for more stories of truth, healing, and finding strength in the darkest moments. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to believe in fairy tales. But 5 years ago, when I met David at a charity fundraiser for Denver Children's Hospital, everything felt perfect. I was 24, fresh out of nursing school, and passionate about my work in pediatric care. He was 27, charming, and worked in marketing for a tech startup downtown. When he approached me that evening, wearing his perfectly tailored suit and that confident smile, I felt like I was living in a romantic movie. "You must be one of the nurses," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Mitchell. I've been watching you with those kids all evening. You have this incredible way with them." I blushed, smoothing down my simple black dress. "Sarah Johnson, and thank you. These kids are everything to me." That night, we talked for hours about our dreams, our families, our futures. David told me about his ambitious plans to climb the corporate ladder, maybe start his own agency someday. I shared my passion for helping sick children heal, my dream of having a family of my own. He listened with such intensity, such genuine interest, that I felt seen in a way I'd never experienced before. Our courtship was like something from a storybook. David would surprise me with flowers at the hospital, take me to cozy restaurants where we'd talk until closing time, and introduce me to his friends as the most amazing woman I've ever met. He made me feel special, cherished, like I was the center of his universe. 6 months later, he proposed during a weekend trip to Aspen. We were hiking near Maroon Lake, the autumn leaves creating a golden canopy above us when he dropped to one knee. The ring was modest. We were both still building our careers, but it was perfect. More importantly, his words were perfect. "Sarah, you've shown me what real love looks like," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I want to build a life with you, have babies with you, grow old together. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the Colorado mountains, everything felt possible. Our wedding was small, but perfect, just family and close friends at a charming venue in downtown Denver. I wore my grandmother's pearls and carried white roses. David looked so handsome in his navy suit, and when he saw me walking down the aisle, he actually cried. His vows were beautiful, promising to love, honor, and provide for me always. "Sarah," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "you are my heart, my future, my everything. I promise to work every day to be the husband you deserve and the father our children will need." The early years of our marriage were blissful. We rented a small apartment in Capitol Hill, furnished it with hand-me-downs and thrift store finds, and made it our cozy home. David was promoted twice in his first year as a married man, and I was building a reputation as one of the most dedicated nurses in the pediatric ward. We'd spend our evenings cooking together, talking about our days. Planning our future. It was during our second year of marriage that we seriously started talking about children. I always dreamed of being a mother, and working with kids every day only strengthened that desire. David seemed equally excited about the prospect of fatherhood. "I want to be the kind of dad who never misses a soccer game," he told me one evening as we cuddled on our old couch. "The kind who reads bedtime stories and helps with homework. I want to give our kids everything I didn't have growing up." That's when we decided to start the baby fund. David suggested it, actually. He said we needed to be financially responsible, to save up for all the expenses that come with a child, medical bills, baby gear, eventually college tuition. It seemed so mature, so thoughtful. I fell in love with him all over again for his careful planning and dedication to our future family. We opened a joint savings account specifically for the baby fund, and David took charge of managing it. He was good with numbers, he said, and he wanted to make sure we were maximizing our savings potential. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner, the father of my future children. How foolish I was to believe that love was enough to protect me from betrayal. The baby fund became our shared obsession, our beacon of hope for the future we were building together. I kept a small journal where I meticulously recorded every sacrifice we made, every dollar we saved. Looking through those pages now, I can barely stand the optimism that bleeds through my careful handwriting. January 15th, skipped dinner out, cooked pasta at home instead, saved $60 for baby fund. February 3rd, David walked to work instead of taking Uber, saved $12 for baby fund. March 22nd, canceled Netflix subscription, saved $15 a month for baby fund. Every entry was a small victory, a step closer to our dream. I'd write them with such joy, imagining the day when we'd use that money to buy a crib, a stroller, tiny onesies, and soft pastels. David would sometimes read over my shoulder, kiss my cheek, and say, "You're going to be such an amazing mom, Sarah. Our baby is so lucky." We had our system down to a science. On the last Friday of every month, we'd sit together at our kitchen table with our paychecks and bills spread out before us. David would calculate our expenses, and I'd figure out how much we could realistically save that month. Then we'd walk to the bank together, hand in hand, and make our deposit. It was our ritual, our promise to our future child. The sacrifices felt meaningful because they were shared. We'd spend Friday nights at home instead of going out, cooking elaborate meals from scratch, and pretending we were dining at fancy restaurants. We'd have movie nights with films from the library instead of going to theaters. I'd pack lunches for both of us every morning, and David would bring home free coffee from his office instead of stopping at our favorite cafe. Every dollar we don't spend on ourselves is a dollar we're investing in our baby's future. David would remind me when I'd occasionally feel wistful about our old spontaneous lifestyle. Think about how grateful our child will be that we made these choices. He was right, of course. Or at least I thought he was. I'd look at my coworkers who were drowning in debt, struggling to make ends meet even without children, and I'd feel proud of our discipline. We were being responsible, mature, preparing for parenthood the right way. The first year of saving was the hardest. We were still adjusting to living on a restricted budget, still learning to find joy in simple pleasures. But as our balance grew, first to $5,000, then $10,000, the sacrifice felt increasingly worthwhile. I'd check our account balance obsessively, smiling every time I saw that number climb higher. By our second year of saving, we'd found our rhythm. I'd started taking on extra shifts at the hospital, working occasional weekend doubles that left me exhausted but fulfilled. The overtime pay went straight into the baby fund. David picked up freelance marketing projects in his spare time, working late into the night on his laptop at our kitchen table. I'd bring him coffee and rub his shoulders, both of us united in our shared goal. We're going to be able to give our child everything, he'd tell me during those late night work sessions. Private school, college tuition, maybe even a car for their 16th birthday. All because we're willing to sacrifice now. I love those conversations about our future child. We'd debate names endlessly. I favored classic names like Emma or Benjamin, while David preferred more modern choices like Harper or Mason. We'd talk about what sports they might play, what instruments they might learn, whether they'd have David's green eyes or my brown ones. I hope they have your compassion, David would say. The way you care for those kids at the hospital, our child is going to be so lucky to have you as their mom. Those words meant everything to me. Working in pediatric care, I saw so many different parenting styles, so many different family dynamics. I was determined to be the kind of mother who would nurture, support, and unconditionally love our child. David's recognition of that dream made me feel seen and valued. The third year of saving brought us to new heights of discipline. We'd found ways to cut expenses I never thought possible. I learned to cut my own hair, following YouTube tutorials in our bathroom mirror. David started biking to work year-round, even in Denver's harsh winters. We canceled our gym memberships and started hiking the free trails around the city. Instead, our social life changed too. We'd host potluck dinners instead of going out to restaurants, and our friends understood. Most of them were starting families too, dealing with their own financial pressures. We'd have game nights where everyone brought their own drinks, or we'd meet at parks for picnics instead of expensive brunches. You two are so smart to save up first, our friend Jenny would tell us. Mark and I just winged it when we had the twins, and we're still paying off the hospital bills. By the time our baby fund reached $40,000, I felt like we were finally ready. We'd proven we could sacrifice for our child's future. We'd shown we were mature enough, responsible enough to be parents. I started quietly researching fertility, doctors, thinking about the next steps in our journey. Maybe we should start trying soon, I suggested to David one evening as we made our monthly deposit. We've saved more than we originally planned. Just a little more, he said, squeezing my hand. I want to make sure we have enough for everything, medical bills, baby gear, time off work. You deserve to take a full maternity leave without worrying about money. His thoughtfulness made me fall in love with him even more. While other husbands might have been eager to start trying immediately, David was thinking about my comfort, my security. He wanted to make sure I could focus on bonding with our baby without financial stress. $45,000, $46,000, $47,000. Each milestone felt like a victory. I'd started secretly browsing baby websites, bookmarking cribs and strollers, and thinking about nursery themes. David would catch me sometimes, and instead of teasing me about getting ahead of myself, he'd lean over my shoulder and point out features he liked. That convertible crib is perfect, he'd say. It'll last until they're ready for a real bed. I thought we were the perfect team, building toward our perfect future together. I thought our baby fund was a symbol of our love, our commitment, our shared dreams. I had no idea it was funding someone else's dreams entirely. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my world collapsed. I remember the exact date, October 15th, because it's now permanently etched in my memory as the day my marriage died. I was getting ready for work, running through my usual morning routine, when I decided to check our baby fund balance. It was something I did weekly, a small ritual that brought me joy and motivation for the day ahead. I grabbed my phone and opened our banking app, expecting to see that familiar number hovering just below, $47,000. We'd been so close to our goal of $50,000, so close to finally starting our family, but when the screen loaded, I stared at it in confusion. The balance showed $0. That couldn't be right. I refreshed the app, thinking it was a technical glitch. Maybe the bank system was down, or there was some error in loading our account information, but the screen refreshed to show the same devastating number. $0.00. My hand started shaking as I clicked on the transaction history. What I saw there made my stomach drop to the floor. Withdrawal after withdrawal, all over the past 6 months. $3,000 here, $5,000 there, $8,000 the week before. Each transaction was authorized by David's debit card, each one steadily draining our future. I sank onto our bed, staring at the screen in disbelief. 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of careful saving, 3 years of dreams, all gone. Just like that, the dates on the transactions told a story I couldn't comprehend. While I'd been working extra shifts and packing lunches and walking instead of taking buses, David had been systematically emptying our baby fund. My first instinct was to call him immediately to demand an explanation. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the methodical nature of the withdrawals, the way they were spaced out over months, clearly calculated to avoid detection. This wasn't an impulsive mistake or a moment of weakness. This was planned, deliberate, sustained deception. I called in sick to work that day, something I'd never done without a genuine emergency. But this felt like an emergency, the biggest emergency of my life. I spent the morning combing through our other accounts, checking credit card statements, looking for any clue about where that money had gone. Our joint checking account was normal, just our usual monthly expenses. Our individual accounts were small, just the modest personal spending money we each allowed ourselves. But then I found something strange, a credit card statement for an account I didn't recognize. Addressed to David at our home address. The statement showed charges I didn't understand. Expensive restaurants I'd never been to. A jewelry store purchase for $2,800. Monthly payments to something called Riverside Luxury Apartments. Hotel charges in downtown Denver on nights when David claimed he was working late at the office. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved into the toilet, my body rejecting the reality of what I was seeing. David, my husband, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future, was living some kind of secret life. A life funded by our baby money. When he came home that evening, I was sitting at our kitchen table, the bank statements spread out in front of me. I'd been practicing what I would say, how I would confront him, but when I saw his face, all my carefully planned words disappeared. "Sarah, you're home early," he said, loosening his tie. "Are you feeling okay? Where's our money, David?" The words came out flat, emotionless. I felt like I was watching someone else speak. His face went pale. "What do you mean? Our baby fund?" "It's gone. All of it. Where is it?" For a moment, he just stood there, clearly calculating his response. I could see the wheels turning in his head, searching for an explanation that would make this okay. That's when I knew for certain that this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was intentional. "Sarah, I can explain," he said, moving toward me with his hands raised as if approaching a wild animal. "I made some investments, good investments. The money isn't gone, it's just, don't lie to me." My voice was stronger now, fueled by anger I didn't know I possessed. "I found the credit card statements, Riverside Luxury Apartments. What is that, David?" The color drained from his face completely. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "We saved for 3 years. 3 years, David. I worked double shifts. We ate pasta 5 nights a week. We haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. And you're telling me it's complicated? Sarah, please, let me explain. I'm listening." "Explain where our baby money went." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing but now made me want to scream. "I was trying to make more money for us. I met this investment advisor and he said he could triple our savings if we moved it to a different account. I was trying to surprise you." Even as he spoke, I could see he didn't believe his own words. The lie was so transparent, so insulting to my intelligence, that I felt a new wave of fury wash over me. "What about the apartment, David?" What? About the jewelry store? What about the restaurants? That's business. For work, I can write them off. Our baby fund money paid for business expenses? I'll pay it back, all of it. I swear, Sarah, I'll pay it back with interest. I looked at this man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. This man I'd trusted with my deepest dreams, and I didn't recognize him. The David I'd married would never have stolen from our future child. The David I'd married would never have looked me in the eye and lied so blatantly. I don't believe you, I said quietly. I don't believe a word you're saying. That's when I knew our marriage was over. Not because of the money, though that betrayal cut deep, but because of the lies. The easy, fluid lies that came so naturally to him. If he could lie about this, what else had he been lying about? Sarah, please, we can work this out. I love you. If you loved me, you never would have stolen our baby's future. I walked past him toward our bedroom, my legs shaking with each step. I needed space to think, to process what I discovered. But as I reached our bedroom door, I turned back to look at him one more time. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, I said. Don't try to talk to me. Don't try to explain. Just don't. That night, lying in our guest bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. My marriage was a lie. My future was a lie. The man I trusted with everything had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, but I also realized something else. I was going to find out the truth. All of it. Whatever David was hiding, whatever he'd done with our money, I was going to uncover it. I owed that much to the woman I'd been yesterday before I discovered that my husband was a stranger. The next morning, David was gone before I woke up. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written as familiar handwriting that now seemed somehow foreign to me. Gone to work early. We'll talk tonight. I love you. Did I bold the note and threw it in the trash, then immediately retrieved it. Evidence, I thought. Everything is evidence now. The realization that I was thinking like someone preparing for battle rather than someone trying to save her marriage was jarring. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was going to need proof, everything. I called in sick to work again, knowing that my colleagues were probably wondering what was wrong. In 5 years of nursing, I'd never taken consecutive sick days unless I was genuinely ill. But I couldn't face the pediatric ward today. Couldn't smile at worried parents and comfort sick children when my own world was falling apart instead. I spent the day going through everything, every bank statement, every credit card bill, every receipt I could find. I made copies of everything, organized them by date, highlighted the transactions that didn't make sense. The evidence painted a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. The mysterious credit card had been opened 8 months ago, around the same time the baby fund withdrawals started. The charges were consistent, expensive dinners every Friday night, the monthly apartment payment, regular purchases at high-end stores I'd never shopped at. Someone was living a lifestyle that our budget couldn't support. And it wasn't me, by the time David came home that evening. I had everything laid out on our dining room table like a prosecutor preparing for trial. I'd been rehearsing what I would say, but when I saw his face, I could tell he'd been preparing too. Sarah, I'm so sorry, he said before I could speak. I should have told you about the investments from the beginning. I was trying to surprise you to make our baby fund grow faster, but I realize now how it must look. Sit down, David. My voice was calmer than I felt. We need to talk about this properly. He sat across from me, and I noticed he avoided looking at the papers spread across the table. His phone was face down beside his keys, and I saw the screen light up with a text message. His hand moved toward it automatically, then stopped when he saw me watching. First, I said, I need you to tell me the truth. Not the story you've been preparing, not the explanation you think I want to hear. The truth. I am telling you the truth. I made some investments that didn't pan out the way I hoped. I was trying to grow our savings, David. I held up the credit card statement. Riverside luxury apartments. $2,800 a month for 8 months. That's over $22,000 from our baby fund, just on rent for some apartment. What investment advisor told you to rent an apartment? His face went white. That's complicated. Stop saying that. Stop saying it's complicated. I'm your wife. I deserve to know where our money went. It's a business expense. For work. Sometimes I need a quiet place to meet with clients. You meet with clients in a luxury apartment. What kind of clients, David? Important ones. High-value accounts. The kind that expect a certain level of stop. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Just stop lying to me. I'm not stupid, David. I'm not naive. I know what $2,800 a month gets here in this city, and it's not a business meeting space. His phone lit up again with another text. This time he couldn't help himself. He glanced at it. I saw his expression change, saw something like panic flash across his face. Who's texting you? Nobody. Just work stuff. Show me. Sarah, this is getting ridiculous. You're acting like what? Like a wife who just discovered her husband stole their baby fund? I reached for his phone, but he grabbed it first. This is my private property. You can't just private property. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. We're married, David. We're supposed to be partners. We're supposed to be planning a family together. But apparently you have a whole private life I don't know about. He clutched the phone to his chest like a shield. You're being paranoid. Am I? Then prove it. Show me the phone. Show me these business texts that are so important they can't wait until our conversation is over. I don't have to prove anything to you. Those words hit me like a physical blow. In all our years together, through every disagreement and misunderstanding, we'd never spoken to each other like this. We'd always been a team, always been united in solving problems together. Now he was treating me like an adversary, like someone he needed to protect himself from. You don't have to prove anything to me, I repeated slowly. Your wife, the woman you promised to love and honor, the woman you've been planning a family with. I don't deserve to know where our shared money went. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I gathered up the papers from the table. You know what, David? You're right. You don't have to prove anything to me. But I don't have to stay here and listen to lies either. I started toward the bedroom, but he stood up and grabbed my arm. Sarah, wait, please. I can explain everything. Just give me a chance. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Let go of me. Not until you hear me out. Not until you understand. Let go of me, David. My voice was deadly quiet. Right now. He released my arm immediately, stepping back with his hands raised. I'm sorry. I didn't mean Sarah. I would never hurt you. You know that. I don't know anything anymore. I rubbed my arm where he'd grabbed it. The David the first married would never have stolen from our future child. The David the first married would never have lied to my face for months. The David the first married wouldn't have secret apartments and secret credit cards and secret text messages. So no, I don't know that you would never hurt me. I don't know you at all. His phone buzzed again. This time, he ignored it, but I could see the effort it took. Who is she, David? What? Whoever keeps texting you. Whoever you're so desperate to respond to that you can't focus on the conversation. That's going to determine whether our marriage survives. Who is she? There's no, don't you dare lie to me again. My voice broke on the last word. Don't you dare look me in the eye and lie to me again. I can't take it, David. I can't take any more lies. For a moment, he just stood there, his phone buzzing insistently in his hand. I could see the war playing out on his face, the part of him that wanted to keep lying battling with the part that knew he was caught. Her name is Jessica, he said finally, the words barely above a whisper. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd suspected, even though the evidence pointed to another woman, hearing him say her name made it real in a way that documentation couldn't. Jessica, I repeated. And the apartment? It's hers. I help her with the rent. Our baby money helps her with the rent? Sarah, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. You're having an affair. You've been using our baby fund to support your girlfriend, while I've been working double shifts and eating pasta. 5 nights a week, you've been playing house with Jessica. It's not like that. Then what is it like, David? Explain to me how it's not exactly like that. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. His phone buzzed again, and this time he looked at it automatically. I saw his face change, saw something like tenderness flash across his features. She's pregnant, isn't she? The words came out of nowhere, but as soon as I said them, I knew they were true. That's why you needed so much money. That's why you cleaned out our baby fund. Jessica is having your baby. David's face crumpled. Sarah, get out. The words were so quiet, I wasn't sure I'd said them out loud. Get out of this house, get out of my sight, get out of my life. Sarah, please, let me explain. Get out. I screamed, all my composure. Finally breaking. Get out, get out, get out. He backed toward the door, still clutching his phone, still trying to speak. Sarah, I love you. I never meant for this to happen. I love you. If you loved me, you never would have done this. If you loved me, you wouldn't have stolen our baby's future to give to hers. The door slammed behind him, and I was alone in the house that had been our home, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. I sank to the floor and cried until I had no tears left, mourning not just the money or the marriage, but the future I believed in, the future that had never been real at all. After David left, I sat on our living room floor for what felt like hours, staring at the evidence scattered around me. The silence in the house was deafening. No television, no music, just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional car passing outside. I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that made me who I was. But eventually, the numbness gave way to something else. A cold, determined anger. David thought he could lie to me, steal from, and then walk away with just an "I'm sorry" and a promise to explain later. He thought I would sit here and wait for him to come back with more lies, more excuses, more manipulation. He was wrong. I gathered up all the papers from the dining room table and spread them out again. This time with a different purpose. I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I was looking for weapons. If David wanted to play games, if he wanted to treat our marriage like a business transaction he could manipulate, then I would learn to play by his rules. I started with our joint accounts, printing out statements going back 2 years. The pattern was clear once I knew what to look for. The baby fund withdrawals had started 8 months ago, but there were other irregularities going back much further. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $300 there, always from our joint checking account. Always on days when I was working long shifts and wouldn't notice immediately. Our credit cards told an even more damning story. David had been the primary user of our joint card, and I'd trusted him to manage our shared expenses. But looking at the statements now, I could see charges I didn't recognize scattered throughout the past year. Expensive lunches, clothing stores I'd never shopped at. Even a charge at a jewelry store last Valentine's Day a day when David had claimed he was too busy with work to celebrate. And I'd been understanding and supportive. The jewelry store charge was for $847 on Valentine's Day. While he was telling me we couldn't afford to go out to dinner, I called the store. "Hi, this is Sarah Mitchell," I said when someone answered. "I'm calling about a purchase made on February 14th. Could you tell me what was bought?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't give out information about specific purchases without... It's my husband's card. We have a joint account. I can provide the card number. After some back and forth and verification, the sales associate was able to look up the purchase. It was a gold necklace with a heart pendant. Very pretty piece. There was also an engraving. My heart sank. What did the engraving say? To my love, J, forever yours. D. I hung up the phone and sat there staring at the statement, J. Jessica, while I'd been working a double shift on Valentine's Day. Understanding and supportive about his busy schedule, David had been buying jewelry for another woman. Jewelry paid for with our joint credit card, our shared money, our future. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about the baby fund. This affair had been going on for over a year, funded by our shared accounts, hidden in plain sight among our regular expenses. I'd been so trusting, so focused on our future together, that I'd never thought to question the charges on our statements. I pulled out my laptop and started a spreadsheet, meticulously documenting every suspicious charge. Restaurant meals on nights he claimed to be working late. Hotels in Denver when he said he was traveling for business. Recurring charges to places I'd never heard of. By the time I was done, I'd identified over $15,000 in questionable expenses over the past year, all separate from the baby fund money, but I needed more than just financial records. I needed to understand the scope of his deception, the full extent of what he'd been hiding from me. I started searching through his personal items, something I'd never done before, something that would have felt like a violation of trust. Just 2 days ago, in his desk drawer, I found a second phone. An iPhone I'd never seen before, password protected and definitely not the Android he carried every day. My hands were shaking as I tried to turn it on, but of course I couldn't access it without his passcode. Underneath the phone, there was a folder filled with documents, lease agreements, insurance papers, medical records, all for addresses and accounts I didn't recognize. The lease was for the Riverside Luxury Apartments, a 2-bedroom unit rented under David's name starting 8 months ago. The security deposit alone was $4,200, paid with a cashier's check drawn from our baby fund, but it was the medical records that made my blood run cold. Prenatal appointment confirmations for Jessica Martinez, with David Mitchell listed as the emergency contact. Ultrasound appointments, nutritionist consultations, all dated within the past 6 months, all paid for with our health insurance that I'd assumed was just covering the two of us. I called our insurance company. I need to understand our coverage, I told the representative. Are there any dependents on our policy besides my husband and me? Let me check your account, Mrs. Mitchell. There was a pause. Yes, it looks like Jessica Martinez was added as a domestic partner 6 months ago. The paperwork was filed by your husband, domestic partner. David had officially added his pregnant girlfriend to our insurance policy, using our family coverage to pay for her prenatal care. While I'd been dreaming of our future baby, he'd been preparing for hers. I hung up the phone and immediately called back to remove Jessica from our policy. The representative was helpful but confused apparently. Domestic partner additions usually required both spouses' signatures, but David had submitted some kind of waiver claiming I was unavailable to sign. Another lie. Another forgery. Another betrayal. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone with banks, credit card companies, and insurance providers, trying to understand the full scope of David's deception. With each call, the picture became clearer and more devastating. He'd been living a double life for over a year, systematically using our shared resources to fund his affair while I'd been working extra shifts and saving every penny for our future. By evening, I had a complete picture of his betrayal. The baby fund was just the tip of the iceberg. David had stolen not just our dreams, but our entire financial foundation. He had forged my signature on documents, made major decisions without my knowledge, and treated our marriage like a business he could embezzle from. I called my best friend, Jenny. Sarah, it's late. Is everything okay? Jenny, I need you to come over. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it from me before you hear it from anyone else. What's wrong? You're scaring me. My marriage is over. David's been having an affair, and he stole our baby fund to support his pregnant girlfriend. There was a long silence. I'm coming over right now. Jenny, it's almost 10 o'clock. I don't care. I'm coming over. While I waited for Jenny to arrive, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by the evidence of my husband's betrayal. The woman I'd been 3 days ago would have been devastated by this discovery. She would have blamed herself, wondered what she'd done wrong, tried to find a way to save her marriage, but I wasn't that woman anymore. I was someone harder, someone who'd learned that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was someone who'd been betrayed by the person who was supposed to love and protect me most, and I was someone who was going to fight back. When Jenny arrived, I showed her everything. The bank statements, the credit card charges, the insurance records, the medical appointments. She sat there in stunned silence, occasionally muttering, "That bastard," or "I can't believe this," but mostly just listening as I walked her through the systematic destruction of my marriage. "Sarah," she said finally, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known, how could you have known? I didn't know. I trusted him completely. What are you going to do?" I looked around at the evidence spread across my table, thought about David's lies and manipulation, thought about Jessica and the baby that should have been mine. "I'm going to destroy him," I said quietly. "I'm going to make sure he pays for every lie, every stolen dollar, every broken promise. I'm going to make sure he never has the chance to do this to anyone else." Jenny nodded. "Good. He deserves it. And Sarah, whatever you need, whatever you decide to do, I've got your back." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my computer researching divorce attorneys, financial fraud, and my legal options. I was done being the victim in this story. It was time to become the author of my own ending. The next morning, Jenny showed up at my door with coffee and bagels, looking like she hadn't slept much either. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she had that look people get when they're carrying bad news they don't want to deliver. "We need to talk," she said, settling into my kitchen chair. "I went home last night and couldn't stop thinking about everything you told me. And then I remembered some things I should have paid attention to months ago." I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of things?" Jenny pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos. "Remember Mark's birthday dinner in August? At that expensive steakhouse downtown?" I nodded. Mark was Jenny's husband, and they'd invited David and me to celebrate. But David had to work late again. I'd gone alone, feeling slightly embarrassed to be the only person there without a partner. "Well, I took a bunch of pictures that night, and I was looking through them last night." She showed me her phone screen. "Look at this one." The photo was a group shot of the birthday party, but in the background, barely visible at a corner table, I could see a familiar figure, David. He was sitting across from a woman with dark hair, leaning in close, their hands touching across the table. Even from a distance, even in the poor lighting, the intimacy was unmistakable. "That's him," I whispered. "That's David." "I know." I zoomed in to make sure. She swiped to the next photo, which showed the same table with better clarity. The woman was young, probably in her mid-20s, with long dark hair and delicate features. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 6 months. He told me he was working late that night. He sent me a text around 8:30, saying he'd probably be at the office until midnight. This picture was taken at 9:15. The timestamp is right there. I stared at the image, trying to process what I was seeing. While I'd been at his friend's birthday party, making excuses for his absence, feeling embarrassed and alone, David had been 3 tables away with another woman. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "There's more. Jenny said gently. I started thinking about other times I'd seen him around town when you thought he was working. I didn't think much of it at the time. Denver's not that big. You run into people. But now. She pulled up another photo, this one from her Instagram from 2 months ago. It was a selfie she'd taken outside a trendy brunch place downtown, but in the background, walking hand in hand with the same dark-haired woman, was David. This was a Saturday morning. You were working that weekend double shift at the hospital, remember? You complained about missing farmer's market, I remembered. I'd been exhausted, working back-to-back shifts to earn extra money for the baby fund. David had kissed me goodbye that Saturday morning, telling me he was going to spend the day doing yard work and catching up on laundry. Instead, he'd been brunching with his girlfriend. And this one, Jenny continued, showing me another photo. This was at the Cherry Creek Mall last month. I was there with my sister, and I saw them coming out of that expensive jewelry store together. She was wearing a new necklace. A heart necklace. The one he'd bought her for Valentine's Day with our credit card. The one that said, "To my love, J, forever yours, D." Jenny, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me you'd seen him with another woman? She looked miserable. I thought about it. God, Sarah, I went back and forth so many times, but I kept thinking maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she was a work colleague. Maybe they were working on a project together. I didn't want to destroy your marriage over something that might be nothing. So you decided to say nothing. I was wrong. I should have told you immediately. I should have trusted my instincts. But Sarah, you were so happy. You were always talking about the baby fund, about your future plans, about how perfect David was. I couldn't bear to be the one to shatter that. I understood her logic, even though it hurt. How do you tell your best friend that her husband is cheating? How do you destroy someone's happiness based on a suspicion, a photograph, a glimpse across a crowded restaurant? Is there anything else? One more thing. And this one, I'm really sorry I didn't tell you about. She scrolled to a photo that was obviously taken from inside a car. This was last week. I was leaving the grocery store when I saw David's car in the parking lot of that new prenatal clinic on Colorado Boulevard. The photo showed David's distinctive blue Honda Civic parked outside Women's Health Partners, the same clinic whose bills I'd found in his desk drawer. But what made my blood run cold was the timestamp, 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been at work, believing David was in meetings downtown. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what to do, and then I saw them come out together. Jenny's voice was barely above a whisper. David and the same woman from the restaurant. She was obviously pregnant, Sarah. Obviously pregnant, and he had his arm around her like she was his wife. The photo showed exactly what she'd described. David, my husband, walking protectively beside a visibly pregnant woman, his hand on the small of her back in a gesture I recognized because he'd done it to me 1,000 times. They looked like any other expectant couple leaving their prenatal appointment, except that David was my husband, and that should have been our baby. I'm so sorry, Jenny said, tears in her eyes. I should have told you months ago. I should have confronted him myself. I should have done something instead of just watching it happen. It's not your fault, I said, though part of me was angry that she'd kept this from me. He's the one who betrayed me. You were trying to protect me. I was being a coward. Maybe, but it doesn't matter now. What matters is that I know the truth. I looked at the photos again, studying the timeline Jenny had unknowingly documented. The affair had been going on for at least 6 months, probably longer. David hadn't just stolen our money, he'd been living an entirely separate life, one where he was the devoted partner of a pregnant woman, where he attended prenatal appointments and bought expensive jewelry and took romantic dinners. Sarah, what are you going to do? I thought about David's lies, his manipulation, his complete betrayal of everything we'd built together. I thought about the woman in the photos, pregnant with his child while I'd been dreaming of having his baby. I thought about all the nights I'd worked extra shifts, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the money I'd saved for a future that had never been real. I'm going to follow him, I said, tonight. I'm going to see this other life for myself. Sarah, that's not safe. What if he sees you? What if he won't see me? And even if he does, what's he going to do? Get angry? Lie to me? He's already done all of that. Jenny grabbed my hand. Let me come with you. No, this is something I need to do alone. That evening, I sat in my car outside David's office building, waiting for him to emerge. I borrowed Jenny's car so he wouldn't recognize mine, and I dressed in dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low over my face. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad spy movie, but I also felt determined. At 6:30, David walked out of the building and got into his car. I followed at a safe distance as he drove across town, my heart pounding with each turn. He wasn't going home. He wasn't coming back to face me, to try to explain or apologize or fix what he'd broken. He was going to Redot, and I was going to find out exactly what kind of life he'd built with my stolen dreams. I followed David's car through the busy Denver streets, staying several cars behind, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. He drove with purpose, clearly familiar with the route, taking turns without hesitation. This wasn't someone going somewhere new. This was someone going home. The Riverside. Luxury apartments were exactly what the name suggested. A gleaming high-rise building in the trendy Lodo district with a doorman, valet parking, and the kind of modern glass facade that screamed expensive. I watched from across the street as David pulled into the underground garage. Using what was obviously a residence keycard to access the entrance, I sat in Jenny's car for a long time, staring up at the building and trying to process what I was seeing. David lived here. My husband, who'd convinced me we couldn't afford to go out to dinner, who'd argued that we needed to save every penny for our future family, had been maintaining a second residence in one of the most expensive apartment buildings in downtown Denver. The monthly rent on a place like this had to be at least $3,000, probably more, added in utilities, parking, and all the other expenses of maintaining two households. And David was spending more money every month than my entire nursing salary. No wonder our baby fund had disappeared so quickly. I pulled out my phone and called the building's leasing office, which was probably closed at this hour, but might have an after-hours number. Riverside Luxury Apartments, this is Maria speaking. Hi, I'm calling about one of your residents. David Mitchell in unit? I paused, realizing I didn't know which unit he was in. I'm sorry, I can't give out information about our residents without proper authorization. Are you family? And his wife. There was a pause. Oh, well, Mr. Mitchell didn't list a wife on his lease application. Are you perhaps thinking of a different David Mitchell? My heart sank. No, it's definitely him. Blue Honda Civic, works in marketing, about 6 foot tall with brown hair. That sounds right, but like I said, he listed himself as single on his application. And his emergency contact is listed as Jessica Martinez. Jessica Martinez is his emergency contact? Yes, she's also listed as his domestic partner on the lease. I really shouldn't be giving out this information over the phone. If you'd like to come in with proper identification, I hung up. Domestic partner. David had officially listed Jessica as his domestic partner on the lease, just like he'd done with our insurance. In the eyes of the law, in the eyes of this building, in the eyes of everyone in his other life, Jessica was his partner. I was just some woman calling with questions about a man she had no connection to. I sat there for another hour, watching the building, trying to work up the courage to go inside. Other residents came and went, young professionals, couples walking small dogs, families with children, normal people living normal lives in their expensive apartments. probably unaware that one of their neighbors was living a double life funded by stolen dreams. Finally, I saw movement that made my breath catch. David appeared in one of the windows, on the 7th floor, silhouetted against the warm light of what was obviously a living room. And then another figure joined him, a woman with dark hair, visibly pregnant even in profile. They embraced, and I watched as David placed his hands on her swollen belly in a gesture of such tenderness that it made me physically sick. That should have been me. That should have been our baby, our apartment, our life together. I grabbed the spare key to David's car from my purse, a key I had made years ago in case of emergencies, and walked across the street. If David could maintain a secret life, then I could do a little investigating of my own. His car was in the underground garage, and I needed to see what else he might be hiding. The garage was well lit and secure, requiring a keycard to enter, but I managed to slip in behind another resident. David's car was parked in spot 47, and I noticed there was a second parking space next to it, marked with the same unit number. A silver Mercedes convertible sat in the other space, clearly Jessica's car, and clearly not the kind of vehicle someone could afford on a normal salary. David's car was unlocked, which was typical for him in secure parking areas. I slipped inside and started searching through the glove compartment, the center console, anywhere he might keep important documents. What I found made my stomach turn. Insurance cards listing Jessica Martinez as the primary insured and David as the spouse. Registration for the Mercedes in Jessica's name, with David listed as a co-signer. A lease agreement for the apartment that I'd never seen, signed 8 months ago, with a security deposit of $4,200, exactly matching one of the large withdrawals from our baby fund. But it was the small leather portfolio in the back seat that really shocked me. Inside were dozens of ultrasound photos, the kind expectant parents collect and treasure. Each one was dated, showing the progression of a pregnancy that was now clearly in its 3rd trimester. On the back of each photo, in David's handwriting, were little notes. Baby's first picture. Look at those tiny hands. Our little miracle at 20 weeks. Our little miracle. David had been attending every prenatal appointment, celebrating every milestone, building a relationship with this unborn child while I'd been working extra shifts to save money for the baby. I thought we'd have together. There were other things too. A second wallet containing credit cards I'd never seen, all in David's name but with the apartment address. A set of keys that obviously belonged to the apartment upstairs. Even a spare phone charger and some clothes in the trunk, as if he regularly stayed overnight. This wasn't just an affair. This was a complete second life, as real and detailed as the life he'd been living with me. Maybe more real, since he'd been investing our money in this life while letting our shared life wither from neglect. I was putting everything back when I heard voices approaching. Panicking, I slipped out of the car and hid behind a concrete pillar as David and Jessica walked toward the parking area. They were talking quietly, and their voices echoed in the garage. The doctor said everything looks perfect, Jessica was saying. The baby should be here right on schedule. I can't wait to meet her, David replied. 3 more weeks, and we'll finally be a real family. What about Sarah? My heart stopped. They were talking about me. What about her? David's voice was cold, dismissive. I told you that marriage has been over for months. We're just roommates at this point. Once the baby's born and I get the divorce finalized, we can finally be together officially. But what if she fights it? What if she wants alimony or half of everything? David laughed, and the sound made my blood run cold. She can't fight what she doesn't know about. Sarah's too trusting, too naive. She has no idea about any of this. By the time she figures out what's happening, it'll be too late for her to do anything about it. I feel bad about the money, though. That was supposed to be for your baby with her. That money is better invested in our real future. Sarah's dreams were just fantasies anyway. She would have been a terrible mother too. Soft, too emotional. Our daughter is going to have everything she needs because I was smart enough to plan ahead. They got into the Mercedes and drove away, leaving me crouched behind the pillar in a state of shock. David wasn't just cheating on me, he was planning to divorce me, take everything we built together, and start fresh with Jessica and their baby. He'd been systematically draining our shared resources to fund his new life while planning to leave me with nothing. But what he didn't know was that I'd just heard everything. I had evidence now, not just of his affair, but of his premeditated plan to destroy me financially and emotionally. He thought I was too naive, too trusting to fight back. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with everything I'd discovered. David's betrayal was deeper and more calculating than I'd imagined. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. It was a calculated plan to replace me, funded by our shared dreams. But now I knew the truth. I knew about Jessica, about the apartment, about their baby. I knew about his plans for our divorce, and his assumption that I'd be too weak to fight back. David had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. He thought the woman who'd worked double shifts and saved every penny was too soft to protect herself when threatened. He thought the woman who trusted him completely was too naive to fight dirty when necessary. Tomorrow, I would start proving him wrong. I spent a sleepless night planning my next move. David thought I was too naive, too trusting to uncover his deception, but he'd underestimated my determination. I'd built my nursing career on attention to detail and calm decision-making under pressure. Now I would apply those same skills to dismantling his lies. The next morning, I called in sick to work again and drove back to the Riverside luxury apartments. This time, I wasn't hiding in a borrowed car. I was walking through the front door like I belonged there. I dressed professionally, carried a clipboard, and practiced my story until it felt natural. "Good morning," I told the doorman with a confident smile. "I'm here to see Jessica Martinez in Unit 712. She's expecting me." "Of course, ma'am. Shall I call up to announce you?" "Oh, that's not necessary. She told me to come straight up. I'm her birth photographer. We're doing a maternity session today." The doorman smiled and gestured toward the elevators. "Congratulations to her. Such an exciting time." "It really is," I agreed, my stomach churning with the irony. The elevator ride to the 7th floor felt like it took forever. I stood there watching the numbers climb, trying to prepare myself for what I was about to do. I'd never confronted another woman about an affair. I'd never had to face the person who'd been living the life I thought was mine. Unit 712 was at the end of a plushly carpeted hallway. I stood outside the door for a full minute, listening to my heart pound, before finally raising my hand to knock. Woman who answered the door was exactly as I'd seen in Jenny's photos, but somehow more real and more devastating in person. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with thick dark hair and clear skin that glowed with pregnancy. She was wearing an expensive-looking maternity dress that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 3 months. "Yes," she said, looking confused. "Can I help you? Are you Jessica Martinez?" "Yes, but I'm not expecting anyone today. Who are you?" I took a deep breath. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, David's wife." The color drained from her face immediately. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the wife and the mistress, the woman who'd been betrayed and the woman who'd been living a lie. "I think we need to talk," I said. I don't know what you want me to say." "I want you to tell me the truth. I want you to tell me about my husband and my money and the baby you're carrying." She stepped back from the door, but didn't close it. "David said you two were separated." "He said you'd been living separate lives for months." David lied. "We've been living together, sleeping in the same bed, planning our future together, right? Up until I discovered he'd stolen our baby fund to pay for this apartment." Jessica's hand went to her swollen belly in a protective gesture. That's not, he wouldn't. David loves me. He's excited about our baby. I'm sure he is, with my money. I don't understand. Can I come in? I think there are some things you need to know about the man you're having a baby with. She hesitated, clearly torn between curiosity and loyalty to David. Finally, she stepped aside and let me into the apartment. If I'd had any doubts about where our money had gone, they vanished the moment I saw the living space. The apartment was stunning floor to ceiling. Windows overlooking downtown Denver. Modern furniture that looked like it came from expensive showrooms. Artwork on the walls that was clearly original rather than prints. The kitchen had granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The nursery, visible through an open doorway, was already perfectly set up with a white crib, changing table, and rocking chair that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. This is beautiful, I said, and I meant it. Very expensive. David works hard. He's very successful. Jessica, how much do you think David makes at his job? I don't know exactly. Enough to afford this place and take care of our family. I pulled out my phone and showed her David's pay stubs, which I'd photographed the night before. David makes $52,000 a year. Before taxes. This apartment costs $3,200 a month, which means the rent alone is more than his entire take-home pay. She stared at the pay stubs, clearly doing the math in her head. That can't be right. He told me he was a senior vice president. He said he made 6 figures. He's a marketing coordinator. He's never been a senior anything. Jessica sank into one of the expensive chairs, her hand still protectively over her belly. Then how ... where does the money come from? I sat down across from her and pulled out the bank statements I'd brought. For 3 years, David and I saved every penny for a baby fund. We sacrificed everything: vacations, dinners out, new clothes, entertainment. I worked double shifts at the hospital. We lived on pasta and beans so we could save for our future child. Your future child? We were trying to get pregnant. That's what the money was for medical expenses, baby gear, time off work for maternity leave. $47,000 we saved together over 3 years. I showed her the withdrawal records, the dates, and amounts that had steadily drained our account. 8 months ago, David started taking money from our baby fund. Small amounts at first, then larger and larger withdrawals. Look at the dates, Jessica. Look at when it started. She examined the statements, and I could see the moment she realized the timeline. 8 months ago is when he started paying for this apartment. And when did you two start seeing each other? About a year ago. But we didn't move in together until 8 months ago. So David convinced you to move in with him, using money that my husband and I had saved for our own baby. Money that we'd sacrificed everything to save. Jessica was quiet for a long time, studying the documents. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. He told me you two were already separated. He said you'd grown apart, that you were just waiting for the right time to file for divorce. We had sex 3 nights before I discovered the missing money. We made love, and afterward, he held me and talked about how excited he was to start trying for a baby soon. Does that sound like a man who is separated from his wife? The tears were flowing freely now, he said. He said you didn't want children. He said that's why your marriage was failing. Jessica, I'm a pediatric nurse. I've wanted children my entire adult life. David knew that. It's one of the first things I told him when we met. Oh, God. She put her face in her hands. Oh, God, what have I done? You fell in love with a man who lied to you about everything. You're not the villain here, Jessica. We both are David's victims. But I knew he was married. Even if he said you were separated, I knew he was still legally married. I should have insisted he get divorced before we moved in together. When is the baby due? 3 weeks. She looked down at her belly. I'm supposed to be the happiest I've ever been. And instead, I feel like my whole world is falling apart. I understood that feeling intimately. What did David tell you about money, about how he could afford all this? He said he'd gotten a big promotion, a huge raise. He said he was finally making the kind of money that would let us live the life he'd always wanted. The only money David has access to is what he stole from our joint accounts. The furniture in this apartment, the car you drive, the medical bills for your pregnancy, all of it was paid for with money that was supposed to be for my baby. Jessica started crying harder. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. He showed me pay stubs, bank statements. They must have been fake. He's very good at lying. He had me fooled for months. What am I going to do? The baby's coming in 3 weeks, and now I find out everything about our life together is built on lies and stolen money. I looked at this woman who's carrying my husband's child, living in the apartment my dreams had paid for, and I felt something unexpected, sympathy. Jessica wasn't evil. She was just another woman who'd been manipulated by a man who was very good at manipulation. I don't know, I said honestly, but I do know that David can't be allowed to get away with this. He stole from me, he lied to you, and he's planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing while he starts fresh with you and the baby. How do you know that? I heard him talking to you in the parking garage last night. He thinks I'm too naive and trusting to fight back. He thinks he can destroy my life and walk away without consequences. Jessica wiped her eyes. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure he pays for every lie, every stolen dollar, every broken promise. I'm going to make sure the law holds him accountable for what he's done. And what about me? What about the baby? I looked at her swollen belly, at the life growing inside her that was half David's and would soon be in the world. I don't know, Jessica. I really don't know. But I don't think you're my enemy. I think we're both victims of the same man. Will you help me? She asked quietly. Will you help me figure out what to do? It was the last thing I'd expected her to ask and the last thing I'd expected to consider. But looking at her sitting there in the apartment my money had paid for, pregnant with a baby that should have been mine, I realized that Jessica might be the key to making sure David paid for his betrayals. Yes, I said. I think I will. Jessica and I spent the next 2 hours piecing together the full scope of David's deception. What we discovered was more systematic and calculated than either of us had imagined. David hadn't just been living a double life, he'd been orchestrating an elaborate long-term plan to replace one family with another. Show me everything, I told Jessica. Every document, every piece of paper, every record you have of your relationship with David. She led me to a small home office where David apparently worked when he stayed at the apartment. The desk was covered with papers, and as Jessica pulled them out, I began to see the careful planning that had gone into this. The trail. There was a personal calendar that tracked both his lives with methodical precision. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, he was scheduled to be with Jessica dinner dates, doctor appointments, apartment maintenance. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he was with me, maintaining the facade of our marriage. Weekends were split with elaborate lies about work commitments, covering the days he spent with Jessica. Look at this, Jessica said, handing me a notebook. He told me to keep track of all our expenses so he could manage our budget better. The notebook was a detailed record of every dollar David had spent on their life together. Furniture purchases, medical bills, grocery shopping, utilities, everything meticulously documented and totaling far more than David's legitimate income could cover. But what made me sick was the source notes in David's handwriting next to each expense. BF transfer for baby fund, CC cash advance for credit card, SV withdrawal for savings. He'd been tracking how he was stealing from me to fund his life. With Jessica, did you ever wonder how David could afford all this on a marketing coordinator's salary? He told me he'd gotten a huge promotion. He showed me fake pay stubs, created fake bank statements. I trusted him completely. I pulled out my phone and showed her pictures I'd taken of David's real pay stubs. This is what he actually makes. Jessica, you've been living a lifestyle that costs more than twice his annual salary. She stared at the documents, and I could see her doing the math. Everything we have together was paid for with money he stole from you. Not just the money. The time, the attention, the planning, all of it was stolen from our marriage and given to this relationship. Jessica handed me another folder, this one containing medical records. These are from all my prenatal appointments. David insisted on paying for everything out of pocket instead of using insurance. He said it would be better for privacy. I looked through the records and felt sick. Every appointment, every ultrasound, every specialist consultation had been paid for with cash or money orders, clearly to avoid creating a paper trail that might lead back to our joint accounts. The total was staggering, over $12,000 in medical expenses, all funded by our baby money. He's been at every appointment, Jessica continued, every ultrasound, every checkup. He has copies of all the pictures, all the reports. He's been so excited about becoming a father. The irony was devastating. While I'd been working extra shifts to save money for the baby we were planning to have, David had been using that money to actively prepare for a different baby with a different woman. He'd been living the experience I dreamed of, just with someone else. Jessica, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay, did David ever talk about divorcing me? About what would happen to our shared assets, our house, our savings? She looked uncomfortable, sometimes. He said he was waiting for the right time after the baby was born. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. What did he say exactly? He said you wouldn't fight the divorce because you'd be too heartbroken to think clearly. He said you were the type of person who would just want it to be over quickly, even if it meant you didn't get everything you were entitled to. I felt a cold rage building in my chest. He was planning to manipulate my grief to steal from me, legally. He also said ... double quote Jessica hesitated. He said he'd been smart about protecting his assets. He said he'd been moving money around so that when you divorced, you wouldn't have access to very much. Moving money where? I don't know. But he has accounts I don't know about, investments he won't tell me about. He said it was to protect our family's future. I thought about the credit cards I'd found, the accounts I didn't recognize, the systematic way David had been draining our shared resources. He hadn't just been stealing from me, he'd been preparing to leave me financially devastated. Jessica, there's something else I need to tell you, something I overheard last night. I told her about following David to the garage, about overhearing their conversation about the divorce and his plans for our future. Jessica's face went pale as I repeated David's words about how I was too naive to fight back, too trusting to see what was coming. He said that about you? He said I would be a terrible mother. He said our dreams were just fantasies. Jessica started crying again. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was saying those things about you. The way he talked about you to me was different. He said you were a good person, but that you'd grown apart. He told you what you needed to hear to feel okay about the affair. He told me what I needed to hear to keep funding it. What kind of man does this? What kind of person systematically destroys one person's life to build another? I looked around the apartment that my money had furnished, thought about the baby that would be born in 3 weeks using medical care I'd paid for, considered the future David had built by stealing mine. The kind of man who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. The kind of man who thinks other people exist to serve his purposes. Jessica was quiet for a long time, staring at the evidence spread across the desk. Sarah, I want to help you. I want to make sure he pays for what he's done to both of us. What do you mean? I mean, I want to testify against him. I want to give you copies of everything, the fake pay stubs, the expense records, the medical bills. I want to help you prove that he stole your money. Jessica, that would mean admitting your own role in this. It could get messy. I don't care. What he did to you is unforgivable. And what he did to me, lying about everything, making me complicit and stealing from you, that's unforgivable too. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but what I saw was genuine remorse and anger. Jessica had been used just like I had, manipulated into playing a role in David's elaborate scheme. If you're serious about helping me, we need to be smart about this. David can't know that we've talked or that you know the truth. We need to keep gathering evidence until I'm ready to move against him legally. What do you need me to do? Keep records of everything. Document every conversation, every expense, every promise he makes about your future together. And Jessica, yes. When that baby is born, make sure you get a paternity test. Make sure David's name is on the birth certificate. Make sure there's a legal record of his parental responsibility. Why? Because if David thinks he can walk away from his responsibilities to you and the baby, the same way he's trying to walk away from his responsibilities to me, he's going to learn that actions have consequences. Jessica nodded, her jaw set with new determination. He's not going to get away with this. No, I agreed. He's not. As I left the apartment that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced since discovering the empty bank account. Hope. Not hope for my marriage, that was dead and buried, but hope for justice. Hope that David would pay for his betrayals. Hope that I could rebuild my life on my own terms. David had made a crucial mistake in his careful planning. He had assumed that the women in his life would remain isolated from each other, that his lies could be maintained indefinitely. He'd never considered that Jessica and I might compare notes, might work together, might support each other in seeking justice. Was about to learn that he'd underestimated both of us. The next morning, I tried to return to work, thinking that focusing on my patients would help me regain some sense of normalcy. But as I walked through the doors of the pediatric ward, surrounded by the sounds of children and worried parents, everything I'd been holding together suddenly collapsed. I made it through morning rounds, checking on my regular patients and updating their charts. But when I walked into room 314 and saw Mrs. Rodriguez holding her newborn daughter, both of them healthy and glowing with new love, something inside me broke completely. This should have been me. I should have been the one holding my baby, exhausted, but happy after delivery, surrounded by flowers and cards and the overwhelming joy of new motherhood. Instead, in 3 weeks, Jessica would be having that experience with my husband and my money. I excused myself from the room and barely made it to the supply closet before I started sobbing uncontrollably. 5 years of nursing, 5 years of maintaining professional composure in the face of every crisis. And I was falling apart over a patient I barely knew. Sarah, honey, what's wrong? I looked up to see Linda, my charge nurse and mentor, standing in the doorway with concern written all over her face. Linda had been working pediatrics for 20 years, had seen every kind of family crisis imaginable, and had become something of a mother figure to all the younger nurses. I can't do this today. What happened? Are you sick? My marriage is over. The words came out between sobs. My husband has been stealing from me, cheating on me, and his girlfriend is having his baby in 3 weeks. Linda immediately closed the supply closet door and pulled me into a hug. Oh, sweetie. Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I've been working here for 5 years and I've never broken down on the job. But I walked into Mrs. Rodriguez's room and saw her with her baby, and I can't be around happy families right now. I can't pretend to be okay. You don't have to pretend anything. Let me find someone to cover your patients, and you go home. I can't keep calling in sick. I've already missed 3 days this week. Sarah, You just discovered that your entire life was built on lies. You're allowed to not be okay right now. You're allowed to take time to heal. Linda helped me gather my things and walked me to my car, promising to handle my patient assignments and cover for me with the department supervisor. As I drove home, I realized that losing my composure at work was just the beginning. I couldn't keep functioning normally while my life fell apart around me. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter I never thought I'd have to write. Dear Dr. Stevens, I am writing to request a leave of absence from my position in the pediatric ward. Due to unexpected personal circumstances, I am unable to provide the level of care our patients deserve. I am going through a difficult divorce and need time to address legal and emotional issues that are affecting my ability to function professionally. I understand this may create staffing challenges, and I apologize for any inconvenience. I hope to return to work in the coming months, but I cannot provide a specific timeline at this point. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, Sarah Mitchell, R. After I finished the letter, I sat there staring at it. My nursing career had been the one constant in my adult life, the one thing I'd always been able to count on when everything else felt uncertain. Now even that felt tainted by David's betrayal. How could I care for other people's children when I was falling apart over losing the chance to have my own? My phone rang and I saw David's name on the screen. I'd been avoiding his calls for days, but something made me answer this time. Sarah, we need to talk, do we? I thought you were too busy with your other life to worry about me. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but we can work this out. We can go to counseling, figure out how to move forward together. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. David, you stole our baby fund to pay for your pregnant girlfriend's lifestyle. You've been living in a luxury apartment with another woman while lying to my face every single day. What exactly do you think counseling is going to fix? The affair is over. I ended it. I told Jessica that I'm committed to saving our marriage. You're lying. Again, I know about the lease agreement, the insurance policies, the medical bills. I know you've been planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing. There was a long silence. How do you know about that? Because I'm not as naive as you think I am. Because I followed you, David. I've seen the apartment. I've seen the bills. I've seen the life you built with money you stole from me. Sarah, I can explain. No, you can't. There is no explanation for what you've done. There's no excuse for stealing from your wife to support your mistress. She's not my mistress. She's what, David? The love of your life? The mother of your child. The woman you've been planning a future with while lying to me about working late? I never meant for it to happen this way. You absolutely meant for it to happen this way. You planned it, David. You systematically stole from me, lied to me, and manipulated me while building a completely separate life. None of this was an accident. What do you want from me, Sarah? What will it take to fix this? I want you to stay away from me. I want you out of this house. I want you to leave me alone while I figure out how to rebuild the life you destroyed. This is our house, our marriage. You can't just throw me out. Watch me. I hung up the phone and immediately called a locksmith. If David wanted to live with Jessica in their luxury apartment, then that's where he could stay. He wasn't welcome in the home we'd shared, the home I'd been working extra shifts to pay for while he spent our savings on someone else. While I waited for the locksmith, I walked through our house, really looking at it for the first time in years. The furniture we'd bought together when we were newlyweds, the pictures on the walls documenting our life together, the bedroom where we'd made love just days before I discovered his betrayal. Everything felt contaminated now, tainted by the knowledge of his deception. How many nights had he been lying next to me, thinking about Jessica? How many conversations about our future family had been lies? How many times had he held me and told me he loved me while planning to replace me? The locksmith arrived and changed. all the locks, giving me a sense of security I hadn't felt in days. This was my space now, my sanctuary, while I figured out how to move forward. David could keep his luxury apartment and his pregnant girlfriend. I would keep the home we'd built together, the home I'd been paying for while he stole from our future. That evening, Jenny came over with takeout and wine, ready to provide whatever support I needed. I brought comfort food and tissues, she announced, setting bags of Chinese food on my kitchen table. And I'm prepared to stay as long as you need me to. I took a leave of absence from work today. Good. You need time to process all of this without trying to take care of other people. I feel like such a failure, Jenny. I'm 29 years old, and my entire adult life has been built around a man who is systematically betraying me. I don't know who I am without this marriage. You're a brilliant nurse. You're a loyal friend. You're a strong woman who's been taken advantage of by someone who didn't deserve your trust. I don't feel strong. I feel broken. Right now, you're allowed to feel broken. But Sarah, this isn't the end of your story. This is the beginning of your fight back. We sat there eating Chinese food and drinking wine, not talking about David or divorce or stolen money, just being together. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. The worst had happened, my marriage was over, my dreams were shattered, my trust was broken, but I was still here. I was still alive, still capable of laughter and friendship, and hope that David had taken my money, my husband, and my plans for the future. But he hadn't taken my strength, my intelligence, or my determination to rebuild. And as I sat there with my best friend, planning my next steps, I realized that maybe that would be enough. Maybe that would be more than enough. 3 days later, armed with folders full of evidence and a referral from Jenny's sister-in-law, I walked into the law offices of Santos and Associates. The building was intimidating, all marble and mahogany, with the kind of expensive furniture that suggested these lawyers didn't lose very often. Maria Santos herself was exactly what I'd hoped for, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who radiated competence and controlled anger on behalf of her clients. She invited me into her office, a space lined with law books and framed diplomas that immediately made me feel like I was in capable hands. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, settling behind her desk, "I understand you're dealing with some marital and financial issues. Why don't you start from the beginning and tell me everything?" For the next hour, I laid out the entire story. The baby fund, the affair, the stolen money, the secret apartment, the pregnant girlfriend. I showed her bank statements, credit card, bills, insurance records, lease agreements, every piece of evidence I gathered. Maria listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said when I finished, "in 20 years of practicing family law, I've seen a lot of marital betrayals. But the systematic nature of what your husband has done here is remarkable. This isn't just adultery, this is financial. Fraud on a significant scale. What does that mean legally? It means you have grounds for divorce based on adultery and financial misconduct. It also means your husband may have committed crimes that go beyond family court jurisdiction." "Crimes?" Maria pulled out a legal pad and started making a list. "Forgery, if he signed your name to any documents without permission. Identity theft, if he used your personal information to open accounts. Embezzlement of marital assets. Fraud, certainly. The fact that he systematically diverted marital funds for an extramarital relationship while lying to you about the purpose could be prosecuted criminally." I felt a surge of satisfaction. David thought he was so smart, so careful in his planning, but he'd committed actual crimes in the process of betraying me. What are my options? Several. First, we file for divorce immediately, citing adultery and financial misconduct. We'll ask for temporary spousal support, exclusive use of the marital home, and an injunction preventing him from accessing any remaining marital assets. He's already spent most of our savings. Which brings us to option 2, asset recovery. We can force him to account for every penny he spent and potentially recover funds from accounts he may have hidden. If he used marital assets to support his girlfriend, we can argue that those funds should be returned to the marital estate. What about the apartment he's renting for her? That's particularly interesting. If the lease is in his name and paid for with marital funds, you may have a legal interest in that property. We could potentially force a sale or require him to compensate you for your share. I thought about Jessica, 8 months pregnant, and living in an apartment that might legally belong partially to me. His girlfriend didn't know the money was stolen. She thought he'd gotten a big promotion. That may work in her favor if we pursue recovery, but it doesn't absolve your husband of responsibility. He's the one who committed the fraud. Maria leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask you something important. What do you want out of this? Do you want to try to reconcile with your husband, or are you looking to end the marriage and protect yourself financially? The marriage is over. I want him to pay for what he's done, and I want to make sure I'm not left financially destroyed by his choices. Good. Clarity of purpose will serve you well in this process. Maria pulled out a thick folder. Here's what we're going to do. First, we file for divorce and temporary orders this week. Then we conduct discovery to identify all assets, all accounts, all expenditures. We'll depose your husband under oath and require him to account for every dollar. How long will this take? Contested divorces with significant financial issues can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. But Mrs. Mitchell, I think your case may resolve more quickly than that. Why? Because your husband has been incredibly careless. He's left a paper trail that clearly documents his fraud. When he's faced with the evidence you've gathered, he may decide that settling quickly is preferable to having his crimes exposed in open court. And if he doesn't want to settle, Maria smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we take him to trial and let a judge decide how much his betrayal should cost him. Colorado is an equitable distribution state, which means the court will consider his misconduct when dividing assets. A judge who sees evidence of this level of financial fraud and marital betrayal tends to be unsympathetic to the offending party. What about criminal charges? That's a separate process. We can refer the matter to the district attorney's office if you choose to pursue it. Financial fraud of this magnitude could result in felony charges. I thought about David sitting in a courtroom, having to explain to a judge how he'd stolen his wife's baby fund to support his pregnant girlfriend. The idea of him facing real consequences for his actions was deeply satisfying. I want to pursue everything. Divorce, asset recovery, criminal charges, if applicable. I want him to understand that actions have consequences. Excellent. I'll prepare the paperwork and we'll get started immediately. Maria handed me her business card. Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to understand something. This process is going to be difficult. Your husband will likely try to manipulate you to convince you that you're being vindictive or unreasonable. He may promise to change, to make amends, to do whatever it takes to fix things. I won't fall for it. Good, because men who commit this level of systematic deception are often very skilled at manipulation. They're used to getting their way through lies and emotional manipulation. What should I do if he tries to contact me? Refer him to me. From now on, all communication about the divorce goes through attorneys. Don't engage with him directly. Don't respond to his attempts to negotiate or explain. Everything needs to be documented and formal. I left Maria's office feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks: empowerment. For the first time since discovering David's betrayal, I felt like I had some control over my situation. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a woman with excellent legal representation and a strong case for justice. That afternoon, I called Jessica from the parking lot outside the law office. It's Sarah. I just met with my divorce attorney, And there are some things you need to know. What kind of things? The apartment you're living in was paid for with stolen money. Legally, I may have a claim to it as marital property. There was a long silence. What does that mean for me and the baby? I don't know yet, but Jessica, you need to understand that David may be facing criminal charges for financial fraud. This isn't just a messy divorce. This could become a criminal matter. Criminal charges? He stole nearly $50,000 from our joint accounts to support your relationship. That's embezzlement, fraud, possibly identity theft. My attorney thinks the district attorney may be interested in prosecuting. Oh God, what am I supposed to do? I'm having this baby in 2 weeks, and now I find out everything about our life together is criminal? You need your own attorney, Jessica. You need someone to protect your interests and the baby's interests, because David clearly isn't going to. I don't have money for an attorney. Then find one who works on contingency or payment plans. But Jessica, you cannot trust David to handle this situation. He's been lying to both of us for months. He's going to be focused on protecting himself, not you or the baby. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about the legal battle ahead. David had systematically destroyed our marriage and stolen our future, but he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd left evidence. Every credit card charge, every bank transfer, every forged document was proof of his betrayal. He thought he was smart enough to get away with it. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Maria Santos had been clear about what we needed to build an airtight case, documentation of everything. In court, she told me, evidence is everything. Emotions don't matter, stories don't matter. What matters is what you can prove with documents, recordings, and witness testimony. So I became a detective in my own life, methodically gathering proof of David's systematic betrayal. I set up a small command center in our spare bedroom with filing cabinets, a scanner, and multiple copies of every important document. If David thought he could outsmart me, he was about to learn that a pediatric nurse's attention to detail could be applied to more than just medical charts. My first priority was documenting David's lies about his whereabouts. I'd always been trusting, never questioning his claims about working late or weekend business meetings. But now I cross-referenced his stated schedule with his actual movements, and the pattern of deception was stunning. I pulled our cell phone records and mapped at David's location data against his claimed activities. The night he said he was working on a big presentation for Monday morning, his phone had been pinging cell towers near Jessica's apartment from 7 p.m. until midnight. The Saturday he claimed to be helping his colleague move, his phone showed he'd spent the entire day in the Lodo area, near the expensive restaurants and shopping districts dot the weekend business trip to Colorado Springs. That had prevented him from attending my nursing school friend's wedding. His phone had never left Denver. In fact, the location data showed he'd been at Jessica's apartment building the entire weekend. Each lie I uncovered felt like a small victory. David had been so confident in his deception, so sure that I would never think to check his stories. But technology doesn't lie. Even when husbands do .next, I focused on the financial evidence. Maria had given me a checklist of documents to gather, and I was determined to find every piece of proof we might need. I requested statements from every bank we'd ever used, every credit card account, every insurance policy. What I discovered was even worse than I'd initially thought. David had been stealing from our joint accounts for over a year, not just the 8 months I'd originally identified. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $500 there, always with plausible explanations. Emergency car repair, work conference expenses, medical copays. But when I cross-referenced these withdrawals with our actual medical records and car maintenance logs, none of the explanations held up. He'd also opened credit cards in his name using our shared address, running up debts I'd known nothing about. The total was staggering. nearly $80,000 in stolen or hidden money over 18 months. Our baby fund had been just the largest single target, but David had been systematically looting our entire financial foundation. The insurance fraud was particularly galling. He'd not only added Jessica to our health insurance as a domestic partner, but he'd also taken out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, listing himself as the sole beneficiary. When I called the insurance company to inquire about it, the agent cheerfully explained that my husband had been very concerned about making sure you were properly covered. I hung up the phone feeling sick. Had David been planning something worse than just divorce? The timing of the life insurance policy taken out just 2 months after Jessica became pregnant felt deeply ominous, but I wasn't just gathering financial evidence. Maria had also suggested documenting David's ongoing deception, so I decided to give him opportunities to lie and record the results. I bought a small digital recorder and started carrying it whenever I knew David might contact me when he called. That Thursday evening, I was ready. Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation. I want to fight for our marriage. I wanted to go to counseling, figure out how to rebuild trust. What about Jessica, David? What about the baby? That's over. I've ended it completely. I told her I'm committed to saving our marriage, that I made a terrible mistake. I almost laughed. Just that afternoon, Jessica had texted me to say David had stopped by the apartment to discuss baby preparations and had spent the night. But I kept my voice neutral, letting him dig himself deeper. When did you end it? 2 days ago. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but I realized what really matters. Our marriage, our future together. And where have you been staying? At my colleague Mike's place. I didn't want to pressure you by staying here while you're processing everything. Another lie. David didn't have a colleague named Mike, and according to Jessica, he'd been at the apartment every night this week. What about the money, David? How are you going to replace the $47,000 you stole from our baby fund? I didn't steal it, Sarah. I made some bad investment decisions, but I can recover most of it. I've been working with a financial advisor to liquidate some assets. What assets? We don't have any investments worth that much. Some crypto investments I made a few years ago. They've grown significantly. I've been married to David for 5 years. He'd never mentioned cryptocurrency investments, had never shown any interest in digital currency, and had always been conservative with money, or so I'd thought. But I let him continue the lie. How long will it take to recover the money? Maybe 6 months. 8 at the most. Sarah, I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can be stronger than ever. After I hung up, I sat there listening to the recording, marveling at how easily the lies flowed from his mouth. Every word was calculated to manipulate me, to convince me that his betrayal was somehow fixable. But what David didn't know was that I now had recorded proof of his ongoing deception. Over the next week, I documented everything. I photographed David entering and leaving Jessica's apartment building. I recorded 3 more phone calls where he lied about ending the affair, about staying at Mike's house, about his plans to recover our stolen money. I even followed him to a baby store where he spent over an hour selecting infant car seats and strollers with Jessica Dodd. The most damning evidence came from Jessica herself. Despite being 8 months pregnant with David's child, she was furious about the extent of his lies and was now actively helping me document his ongoing deception. He told me you were being vindictive and trying to destroy his life. She texted me after one of David's visits. He said you'd hired a shark lawyer who was going to take everything he owned. What did you tell him? I told him that if he'd been honest with both of us from the beginning, none of this would be happening. I'm done protecting him, Sarah. What he did to you is unforgivable. Jessica started sending me screenshots of David's text messages, voice recordings of their conversations, and detailed accounts of his visits to the apartment. The picture they painted was of a man desperately trying to maintain both relationships while lying to everyone about his intentions. By the end of 2 weeks, I had assembled a case file that would have impressed any prosecutor. Bank records, phone records, insurance documents, recorded conversations, photographic evidence, and witness testimony from Jessica, all documenting David's systematic fraud and ongoing deception. When I delivered everything to Maria Santos, she spent an hour reviewing the evidence before looking up at me with something like awe. Mrs. Mitchell, in 20 years of practice, I've never seen a case this well documented. Your husband either has no idea how much evidence he's left behind, or he genuinely believed you'd never be smart enough to find it. Probably both, I said. David's always thought he was the smartest person in any room. Well, he's about to learn what happens when smart meets thorough. Maria closed the file folders and looked at me seriously. Sarah, with evidence like this, we can destroy him in court. Complete financial recovery, punitive damages, possibly criminal prosecution. Are you prepared for that level of warfare? I thought about the baby fund we'd saved penny by penny, about the nights I'd worked double shifts while David was with Jessica, about the lies he'd told and the future he'd stolen from me. I'm not just prepared for it, I said. I'm looking forward to it. The call from David's mother came on a Tuesday evening, just as I was reviewing the latest evidence files with Maria Santos. Mrs. Mitchell's voice was shaky, uncertain, so different from the confident woman who'd raised the man I'd married. Sarah, dear, could you come over this weekend? Robert and I need to talk to you about David. We've learned some disturbing things. My heart sank. David had clearly told his parents some version of our situation, probably painting himself as the victim of an unreasonable wife. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not sure that's a good idea. David and I are in the middle of divorce proceedings. That's exactly why we need to talk. Sarah, David told us you discovered his affair, but the story he's been telling us doesn't match what we're seeing. Please just give us an hour. We've been family for 5 years. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them that Saturday afternoon. The Mitchell family home in suburban Lakewood had always been a sanctuary for me, a place where I felt welcomed and loved as the daughter they'd never had. Mrs. Mitchell was a retired teacher, warm and nurturing, while Mr. Mitchell was a quiet accountant who'd always treated me with gentle respect. When I arrived, both of David's parents were sitting in their living room with expressions I'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with something that looked like shame. On the coffee table between them was a folder thick with documents. Sarah, Mrs. Mitchell said, standing to hug me, thank you for coming. Please sit down. We owe you an enormous apology. An apology? Mr. Mitchell cleared his throat. David came to us 3 weeks ago asking for money, a significant amount of money. He said you two were having marital problems and that you'd frozen all the joint accounts out of spite. He said he needed $20,000 to hire an attorney and secure temporary housing. My stomach dropped. Did you give it to him? We did, Mrs. Mitchell said quietly. We wrote him a check for $25,000. We've always supported our son, and we believed his version of events. But then, Mr. Mitchell continued, we started hearing things. Your friend Jenny's mother is in our bridge club, and she mentioned that you discovered David had been stealing from your baby fund. That didn't match what David had told us at all. Mrs. Mitchell opened the folder on the coffee table, so we decided to do some investigating of our own. We looked into David's story about needing money for attorneys and housing. The folder contained printed emails, bank statements, and what appeared to be surveillance photos. David's parents had been conducting their own investigation into their son's lies. These are emails between David and someone named Jessica Martinez, Mrs. Mitchell said, her voice tight with controlled anger. We found them on the computer he left here when he moved out for college. He never changed his password. I read the first email, dated just 2 weeks ago. Jess, baby, I know the money situation is tight, but my parents came through. $25,000 that we can use to get ready for Emma's arrival. I told them Sarah was being vindictive about the divorce, and they ate it up. We should have enough now to cover the hospital bills and get caught up on the apartment rent. Can't wait to hold our daughter. Love you both. The betrayal was breathtaking. David had manipulated his own parents into funding his affair, lying about my behavior to steal money from people who'd loved and supported him his entire life. There are dozens of these emails, Mr. Mitchell said. David has been lying to us for months, telling us you were unstable, vindictive, trying to destroy his life. Meanwhile, he's been using money we gave him to support his pregnant girlfriend. Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he'd approached you for money. Don't you dare apologize, Mrs. Mitchell said fiercely. You have nothing to be sorry for. Our son is the one who should be apologizing to you, to us, to that poor girl he's been lying to. Mr. Mitchell pulled out another set of documents. We also hired a private investigator to verify David's claims about needing temporary housing. We found out about the luxury apartment, about the girlfriend, about the baby. Sarah, we had no idea the extent of what he'd been doing to you. The private investigator also discovered something else, Mrs. Mitchell added. David has been telling Jessica that we're wealthy, that we'll help support their family financially after the baby is born. He's been promising her a lifestyle we could never afford, based on money he planned to steal from us. I looked at these kind people who'd welcomed me into their family, who'd been looking forward to grandchildren, who'd trusted their son completely. David had betrayed them just as thoroughly as he'd betrayed me. What are you going to do? We're going to help you, Mr. Mitchell said simply. We're going to testify in your divorce proceedings about David's lies and manipulation. We're going to provide these emails as evidence of his ongoing deception. But he's your son. He's our son, and we love him, Mrs. Mitchell said, tears in her eyes. But what he's done is unforgivable. To you, to us, to that poor pregnant girl, someone has to hold him accountable. We've also decided to cut off all financial support, Mr. Mitchell added. No more money, no more assistance, no more enabling his lies. If David wants to build a life with Jessica and their baby, he'll have to do it with his own resources. What about the $25,000 you already gave him? We're demanding it back, Mrs. Mitchell said. And if he doesn't return it voluntarily, we'll take legal action to recover it. Our attorney says we have grounds for a fraud claim since David obtained the money through deliberate misrepresentation. I sat there looking at these two people who'd been like second parents to me, who were now choosing justice over blind family loyalty. I can't ask you to turn against your own son. You're not asking, Mr. Mitchell said. We're volunteering. Sarah, you've been part of our family for 5 years. You've been nothing but loving, supportive, and kind. David has thrown that away, but we haven't. Mrs. Mitchell reached across and took my hand. I want you to know that whatever happens with the divorce, whatever David does going forward, you will always be welcome in this house. You will always be our daughter-in-law in every way that matters. The kindness and support from David's parents was overwhelming, especially when contrasted with their son's systematic cruelty. These people had raised him with love and integrity, and they were horrified to discover what he'd become. There's something else, Mr. Mitchell said. We want to write a letter to David jointly, telling him exactly what we think of his behavior. We want him to understand that his actions have consequences beyond just his marriage. That evening, the three of us worked together to compose a letter that was both heartbroken and furious. Asterisk, David, we are writing to tell you that we know the truth about your marriage, your affair, and your systematic deception of everyone who loves you. We know about the money you stole from Sarah, the lies you told us to get $25,000, and the promises you made to Jessica based on financial support you planned to steal from us. We are ashamed of what you have become. We raised you to be honest, loyal, and responsible. Instead, you have become a liar, a thief, and a manipulator who destroys the people who trust you most. Effective immediately, we are cutting off all financial support. We are demanding the return of the $25,000 you obtained through fraud. We will be testifying in Sarah's divorce proceedings about your lies and manipulation. Most importantly, we want you to know that Sarah will always be welcome in our home and our hearts. She has been more of a true child to us than you have been, a son. If you want any relationship with us going forward, you will need to make amends for the harm you've caused. That begins with returning every penny you stole and telling the truth about your actions. We love you, but we will not enable your destructive behavior any longer. Mom and Dad. Asterisk as I drove home that evening with copies of the emails and a promise of testimony from David's parents, I realized that David's web of lies was unraveling faster than he could contain. He'd assumed that everyone would believe his version of events, that family loyalty would trump justice, that he could manipulate his way out of consequences. Instead, his lies had turned his own parents against him. The people who loved him, most were now some of his harshest critics. David's betrayal had been so complete, so systematically cruel, that even unconditional parental love had its limits. When Maria Santos reviewed the new evidence on Monday morning, she shook her head in amazement. Sarah, your case just became airtight. When the opposing party's own parents are willing to testify against them, that's usually when defendants start looking for plea bargains. You think David will try to settle? I think David is about to realize that he's lost control of this situation completely. And when narcissistic manipulators lose control, they tend to make desperate decisions that only make things worse for them. I thought about the letter his parents had written, about the evidence that kept mounting, about the criminal charges that might be coming. David had thought he was smart enough to get away with anything. He was about to learn that intelligence without integrity is just elaborate stupidity. The voicemails started the day after his parents' letter was delivered. David had clearly received their ultimatum, and based on the increasingly frantic messages he left on my phone, he was finally beginning to understand that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. The first message was still somewhat controlled, though I could hear the underlying panic. Sarah, it's me. I know you've been talking to my parents, and I understand you're hurt and angry. But we need to discuss this situation rationally as adults. There are things you don't understand, complexities that aren't as simple as they appear. Please call me back so we can work this out. I didn't call back. Maria Santos had been clear. No direct communication with David. Everything had to go through attorneys now. But I did save every voicemail, every text message, every desperate attempt at contact. They were becoming evidence of his state of mind and his growing awareness that his manipulations were failing. The second message, left 3 hours later, was more desperate. Sarah, please pick up the phone. My parents are being completely unreasonable. They don't understand what really happened between us, and they're making decisions based on incomplete information. I can explain everything if you'll just give me a chance. This whole situation has gotten out of hand, and I think we can fix it if we work together. By the fifth message, David's composure was completely gone. Sarah, this is insane. You're destroying my life over a mistake, over something that can be fixed. Yes, I made errors in judgment, but you're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm the father of your future child. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Doesn't our marriage mean anything? You can't just throw away 5 years because of one mistake. The irony was stunning. David was now claiming to be the father of my future child, while his actual child was due to be born any day. But what struck me most was how he kept minimizing his actions, calling systematic fraud. And a year-long affair, a mistake, and errors in judgment. Jessica texted me screenshots of similar messages David was sending her, equally desperate, but with a completely different narrative. Jess, Sarah has lost her mind. She's convinced my parents that I'm some kind of monster, and now they're cutting off all support. She's trying to destroy our family before Emma is even born. I need you to understand that whatever Sarah tells you, whatever lies she spreads, I'm committed to you and our daughter. We just need to get through this together. Two completely different stories to two different women, both designed to make David appear as the victim rather than the perpetrator. But Jessica was no longer buying his manipulation. He's trying to turn us against each other, she texted me. He keeps saying you're vindictive and crazy, that you're making things up to hurt him. But I've seen the bank statements, Sarah. I know where the money came from. The most revealing message came when David finally realized that Jessica was no longer supporting his version of events. He left a voicemail that was so angry and unhinged that it perfectly captured who he really was underneath all the charm and manipulation. Sarah, I know you've been poisoning Jessica against me. I know you've been filling her head with lies about our marriage and our finances. This is exactly the kind of vindictive behavior I told everyone you were capable of. You're so jealous that I found someone better, someone who actually supports. My dreams that you're willing to destroy an innocent woman and her unborn child. This is who you really are, Sarah, bitter, petty, and cruel. You were never good enough for me, and deep down, you know it. I played that message for Maria Santos, and her response was immediate. That's going directly to the judge. That level of vitriol, combined with the obvious projection and victim blaming, tells us everything we need to know about David's character. But David wasn't just leaving angry voicemails. He was also making increasingly desperate attempts to salvage his situation. According to Jessica, he had started promising her things he couldn't possibly deliver. He told me his parents were just temporarily upset that they'd come around once the baby was born, Jessica reported. He said they'd want to be involved in their granddaughter's life, and that would mean financial support again. What did you tell him? I told him I'd seen the letter his parents wrote. I told him I knew they'd cut him off completely and that they were supporting you in the divorce. He got so angry he actually scared me. What do you mean? He started yelling about how everyone was against him, how you turned his entire family against him, how his own parents were choosing a stranger over their son. Then he punched the wall and put a hole in it. The image of David losing control, so completely that he was punching walls, was both satisfying and concerning. Desperate people make dangerous decisions, and I was beginning to worry about what David might do when he realized that all his manipulation had failed. Those concerns proved justified when David showed up at my workplace. I was leaving the hospital after meeting with my supervisor about returning from my leave of absence when I saw him standing by my car in the parking garage. He looked terrible, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't been sleeping. Sarah, we need to talk. No, we don't. All communication goes through my attorney. This is ridiculous. I'm your husband. We should be able to have a conversation without lawyers. You stopped being my husband the day you stole our baby fund to support your pregnant girlfriend. That money wasn't stolen. It was our money, and I made a decision about how to use it. Maybe I should have consulted you, but David, stop. Just stop talking. You didn't make a decision, you committed fraud. You systematically stole from our joint accounts while lying to my face every single day. I was trying to provide for our future. Jessica and I, we could have had everything with my money, with our money. Money that I earned just as much as you did. You earned $52,000 a year, David. You spent more than that on Jessica in 8 months. The math doesn't work, and your lies don't work anymore. He stepped closer, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. Sarah, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems. I'll end things with Jessica completely. David, she's having your baby in a week. You can't end things completely with the mother of your child. The baby, that's complicated. But Sarah, you're my wife. You're my real family. We can start over, have our own children, build the life we always planned. The delusion was breathtaking. David seemed to genuinely believe that he could abandon his pregnant girlfriend and return to our marriage as if nothing had happened. As if I would just forget about the fraud, the lies, the systematic betrayal. I'm filing for divorce, David. I'm seeking full recovery of all stolen assets plus punitive damages. And Maria thinks the district attorney may file criminal charges. Criminal charges? His face went white. Sarah, you can't be serious. It's a marital dispute, not a crime. Embezzlement is a crime. Fraud is a crime. Identity theft is a crime. You committed all three. I never stole anything from you. Then where did the $47,000 go, David? Where did our baby fund go? I invested it. I was trying to make it grow so we could have more for our family. You invested it in another woman's pregnancy. You invested it in luxury apartments and expensive dinners and jewelry for your girlfriend. That's not investment, David. That's theft. He grabbed my arm, not violently, but with a desperation that was almost worse. Sarah, please. I'm begging you. Don't destroy my life over this. I'll pay back every penny. I'll do whatever you want. But please don't press criminal charges. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Let go of me, David. He released me immediately, but continued pleading. I love you, Sarah. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I love you. That has to count for something. If you loved me, you never would have stolen from me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent a year lying to my face while building a life with someone else. One mistake, Sarah. One mistake that got out of hand. Don't let it destroy everything we built together. You destroyed what we built together, David. I'm just making sure there are consequences. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the parking garage. In my rearview mirror, I could see him pulling out his phone, probably to leave another desperate voicemail or send another manipulative text to Jessica. That evening, I called Maria Santos to report the encounter. He's getting desperate, she said. That's usually when opposing parties start making settlement offers. I expect we'll hear from his attorney soon. What kind of settlement? Probably full restitution of stolen funds, plus some additional compensation in exchange for agreeing not to pursue criminal charges. But Sarah, I want you to think carefully about whether you're willing to accept any settlement. You have him, dead to rights on criminal charges. I thought about David standing in the parking garage, begging me not to destroy his life. I thought about Jessica, 8 months pregnant, and living in an apartment paid for with stolen money. I thought about the baby who would be born into this mess of lies and fraud. I want him to pay for what he did, I said. But I also want this to be over. I want to rebuild my life without having to think about David every day. Those aren't mutually exclusive goals. We can make him pay and still give you closure. Then let's do both. David had spent months thinking he was smart enough to manipulate everyone around him. Tomorrow, he would learn what happened when manipulation met justice. The settlement conference was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November, exactly 6 weeks after I discovered the empty baby fund. As I walked into the gleaming conference room at Maria Santos's law firm, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and exhaustion. 6 weeks of legal battles, evidence gathering, and emotional turmoil had led to this moment. David was already there with his attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept shuffling papers and glancing anxiously at the stack of evidence Maria had assembled. David himself looked terrible pale, thin, wearing a suit that seemed too big for him now. When our eyes met across the conference table, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering love. Just a cold satisfaction that justice was finally within reach. Before we begin, Maria announced, I want everyone to understand the strength of our position. Mrs. Mitchell has documented systematic financial fraud totaling $78,000 over 18 months. We have recorded conversations proving ongoing deception, witness testimony from family members, and forensic accounting that traces every stolen dollar. David's attorney, Mr. Brennan, cleared his throat. Ms. Santos, we're prepared to discuss restitution, that your demands for punitive damages are excessive, given that this is fundamentally a marital dispute. Mr. Brennan, Maria replied smoothly, this stopped being a marital dispute when your client committed multiple felonies. Identity theft, embezzlement, fraud, these are criminal matters that the district attorney is prepared to prosecute if we can't reach an agreement today. I watched David's face as Maria laid out the criminal charges he was facing. He looked genuinely shocked, as if he'd never considered that his actions might have legal consequences beyond our divorce. The DA is really pursuing criminal charges? David asked, speaking directly to me for the first time. Don't address my client, Maria said sharply. All communication goes through counsel. Mr. Brennan consulted his notes. What exactly is Mrs. Mitchell seeking in terms of settlement? Maria opened the thick folder containing our demands. Full restitution of all stolen funds, $78,000. Punitive damages of $50,000. Mrs. Mitchell retains the marital home and all furnishings. Mr. Mitchell assumes responsibility for all debts incurred during the marriage. Mrs. Mitchell receives spousal support of $2,000 per month for 3 years. And Mr. Mitchell agrees to cooperate with Mrs. Mitchell's efforts to recover funds from any hidden accounts. That's more than my client earns in 2 years, Mr. Brennan protested. Then your client should have considered that before committing felony fraud, Maria replied. These terms are non-negotiable. Mr. Mitchell accepts this settlement or faces criminal prosecution. David leaned over to whisper urgently with his attorney. I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized that his options had been reduced to paying everything he owed or going to prison. We need a moment to discuss this, Mr. Brennan said. While they huddled in the corner, Maria turned to me. How are you feeling about these terms? I want him to pay for what he did, but I also want this to be over. If he agrees to this settlement, will the criminal charges be dropped? That's up to the DA, but I'll recommend against prosecution if he complies fully with the settlement terms. However, Sarah, if he violates any part of this agreement, we reserve the right to pursue criminal charges. 20 minutes later, David and his attorney returned to the table. David looked defeated, all his earlier arrogance and manipulation replaced by the hollow expression of someone who'd finally been caught. My client agrees to the settlement terms, Mr. Brennan announced, with one modification. The punitive damages will be paid in installments over 2 years rather than as a lump sum. Maria looked at me and I nodded. Acceptable, provided the installments are secured by a lien on any property Mr. Mitchell owns or acquires. Agreed. The next hour was spent reviewing the settlement documents paragraph by paragraph. Every detail was negotiated, every potential loophole closed. David would surrender all claim to our joint assets, return every penny he'd stolen, and pay additional damages for the emotional and financial harm he'd caused. But beyond the money, the settlement included terms that felt like true justice. David had to provide a complete accounting of all financial transactions during our marriage. He had to surrender his passwords and account information for any hidden assets. He had to admit in writing that he had systematically misappropriated marital funds for an extramarital relationship. When it came time to sign the documents, David's hand was shaking. Sarah, he said quietly, ignoring his attorney's warning look. "I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far." "Mr. Mitchell," Maria interrupted, "you're not to address my client." "It's okay," I said. "I want to hear what he has to say." David looked at me with what might have been genuine remorse, though after months of his lies, I couldn't trust any expression on his face. "I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't blame you. But I want you to know that everything I felt for you was real. Our marriage was real, even if I destroyed it." "David," I said calmly, "you stole nearly $80,000 from me to support your pregnant girlfriend. You lied to my face every day for over a year. You manipulated your own parents into giving you money based on lies about me. Nothing about that was real. I know I messed up everything. But Sarah, what we had before Jessica, that was real. No, it wasn't." The David the first married wouldn't have been capable of this level of betrayal. Either you were always this person and I was too trusting to see it, or you became this person and I was married to someone who no longer existed. Either way, what we had is gone. He signed the settlement documents without another word, his signature, finalizing the end of our marriage and the beginning of his financial reckoning. As he gathered his papers and prepared to leave, I felt a profound sense of closure that I hadn't expected. "Mrs. Mitchell," Mr. Brennan said, "my client will begin restitution payments next week. The first payment will be $10,000, covering the return of the funds his parents provided." "How is he planning to come up with that kind of money?" I asked Maria. "Mr. Mitchell is liquidating some assets and taking on additional employment," Mr. Brennan replied diplomatically. After they left, Maria and I sat in the conference room reviewing what we'd accomplished. "Sarah, this is one of the most comprehensive settlements I've ever negotiated in a marital fraud case. You're going to recover everything you lost, plus significant additional compensation. What about Jessica and the baby? That's not your responsibility anymore. Mr. Mitchell will have to figure out how to support his child while also paying his debts to you." I thought about Jessica, who'd given birth to David's daughter just 3 days earlier. According to her last text, David had been absent for the delivery, claiming he had to work. Even with a newborn daughter, he was still lying and making excuses. "Maria, I want to do something. I want to set up a trust fund for David's daughter. Not much, maybe $5,000, but something she can access when she turns 18. "That's very generous of you, especially considering the circumstances." "It's not generous, it's justice. That little girl didn't ask to be born into this situation. She shouldn't pay for her father's crimes." As I left the law office that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. David had been held accountable for his actions. I would recover financially from his betrayal. Most importantly, I had learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The settlement was just the beginning of David's consequences. Within a week, he'd been forced to sell his car to make the first restitution payment. Within a month, he'd moved out of Jessica's luxury apartment and into a studio apartment across town. The lifestyle he'd built on stolen money had collapsed as soon as he had to fund it with his own resources. 6 months later, I received the final settlement payment. David had kept to the agreement, paying every dollar he owed plus interest. He'd also been forced to take a second job to meet his obligations, working evenings and weekends to pay for his crimes. Justice, it turned out, was just as sweet as I'd imagined it would be, but it was also just the beginning of my new life. 8 months after the settlement, I stood in the doorway of my new apartment, holding the keys and marveling at how different my life had become. The space was smaller than the house I'd shared with David, but it was entirely mine, every piece of furniture chosen by me, every photograph representing memories I actually wanted to keep, every decision made without having to consider someone else's secret agenda. The apartment was in Capitol Hill, not far from where David and I had lived when we were newlyweds, but the similarity ended there. This was a bright modern space with large windows and hardwood floors in a building full of young professionals and artists. It felt vibrant and alive, so different from the suburban house where I'd lived the last few years of my marriage and what I now realized had been emotional isolation. My settlement money had not only covered the damage David had done to my finances, it had actually left me in better financial shape than I'd been in years. The punitive damages, combined with my savings from not having to support David's lies anymore, meant I could afford a lifestyle I'd never imagined. Not luxury like Jessica's stolen apartment, but comfort and security and the freedom to make choices based on what I wanted rather than what I could afford. Returning to work had been easier than I'd expected. My colleagues at the hospital had been incredibly supportive throughout the divorce proceedings, and my supervisor had welcomed me back with understanding and flexibility. If anything, the experience had made me a better nurse, more attuned to the subtle signs that patients might be hiding pain, more skilled at reading between the lines when families weren't telling the whole truth. "You seem different," Jenny observed one evening as we sat on my new balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset over downtown Denver. "Stronger, more confident." "I feel different. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions just for me. I don't have to consider anyone else's needs or wants or secret plans." "Are you happy?" I considered the question seriously. "I'm content. I'm optimistic about the future. I think happiness will come, but right now, I'm just grateful to be free from all the lies and manipulation." "Have you heard anything about David recently?" "Jessica sends me updates occasionally. He's struggling financially, working 2 jobs to meet his settlement obligations. He sees his daughter on weekends when he can afford to take time off work." "Do you feel bad about that?" "No. He made his choices, and now he's living with the consequences. His daughter deserves a father who takes responsibility for his actions." The trust fund I'd established for David's daughter was growing steadily. I added to it monthly, not out of guilt or obligation, but because I wanted that little girl to have opportunities her father's poor choices hadn't destroyed. When she turned 18, she'd have enough money for college or whatever dreams she chose to pursue. I'd also started volunteering with a local organization that provided support to women going through difficult divorces. Many of them were dealing with financial fraud, emotional abuse, or systematic manipulation, the same tactics David had used on me. Helping them navigate the legal system and rebuild their lives had become incredibly fulfilling. "I think I want to go back to school," I told Jenny one evening. "Maybe get my master's degree, specialize in family counseling or social work. That makes sense. You've lived through this experience, and now you can help other people who are going through similar situations." "Exactly. I want to turn what happened to me into something useful, something that can help other women avoid the mistakes I made." "What mistakes?" "David was the one who lied and stole and cheated. I was too trusting. I gave up too much control over my own life. I let David handle all our finances, make all our major decisions, plan our entire future without questioning anything. I'll never be that passive again." The dating question came up occasionally, well-meaning friends and family members asking if I was ready to put myself out there or find someone new, but I wasn't interested in replacing David with another man. I was interested in building a life so fulfilling that I wouldn't need anyone else to complete it. That didn't mean I was opposed to love in the future, but any future relationship would be between equals with complete transparency and shared decision-making. I would never again trust someone so completely that I stopped paying attention to my own intuition. The biggest surprise had been my relationship with David's parents. They'd kept their promise to maintain a connection with me, and we had dinner together once a month. It was strange and wonderful to have retained this family bond, even though the marriage that created it was gone. "We think of you as our daughter," Mrs. Mitchell had told me recently. David may have destroyed his marriage, but he can't destroy our love for you. They were devastated by David's choices, but had channeled their disappointment into fierce advocacy for justice. They testified in our settlement proceedings, provided evidence of David's lies, and had cut him off financially until he could prove he'd learned from his mistakes. Has he tried to reconcile with you? I asked Mrs. Mitchell during one of our dinners. He calls occasionally, usually when he needs something, money, babysitting, emotional support, but he's never actually apologized for what he did to you or acknowledged the harm he caused our family. Do you think he ever will? Mr. Mitchell shook his head sadly. I don't think David is capable of that level of self-reflection. He still sees himself as the victim in this situation. Their relationship with their granddaughter was complicated, but growing stronger. They saw Emma regularly, often taking her, while David worked his weekend job. They'd established a college fund for her, separate from the trust I created, determined that their granddaughter would have opportunities despite her father's poor choices. She's beautiful, Mrs. Mitchell told me, showing pictures on her phone. She has David's eyes, but Jessica's smile. And she's smart, already trying to talk at 10 months old. I looked at the pictures without jealousy or pain, just genuine happiness, that this child was loved and cared for. Emma would grow up with grandparents who understood the importance of integrity and responsibility. Even if her father hadn't learned those lessons, the 1-year anniversary of discovering David's betrayal passed quietly. I marked it not with sadness, but with a small celebration of how far I'd come. I'd survived the worst betrayal I could imagine, fought for justice, and built a new life that was entirely my own. I was enrolled in graduate school, pursuing a master's degree in clinical social work with a focus on family therapy. My apartment was decorated with art I loved, filled with furniture I'd chosen, organized exactly the way I wanted it. My savings account was growing steadily, no longer vulnerable to someone else's secret spending. Most importantly, I'd learned to trust my own judgment again. The woman who'd been too naive to see David's lies had become someone who could read people's motivations, spot inconsistencies in their stories, and protect herself from manipulation. "I'm proud of you," Jenny said one evening as we walked through downtown Denver, enjoying the spring weather. "You've turned a horrible situation into something positive. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and I've learned that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It can transform you into someone better. Do you ever miss him?" Miss being married? I considered the question honestly. I miss the idea of him. I miss believing I was married to someone honest and loyal. But I don't miss the actual relationship, because the actual relationship was built on lies. And you don't want to try again with someone else? Someday, maybe. But only with someone who earns my trust slowly, who proves their integrity over time, who understands that I'm not the naive woman I used to be. As we walked past the restaurant where David and I had our first date, I felt no sadness or nostalgia. That woman, that relationship, that version of my life belonged to the past. I was someone different now, stronger, wiser, more self-reliant. The future stretched ahead of me, full of possibilities I was only beginning to explore. Graduate school, a new career, helping other women escape destructive relationships. Maybe travel to places David had never wanted to go. Maybe love again, but only on my terms, with someone who deserved the trust I was now careful about giving. David had tried to steal my future, but he'd accidentally given me something better, the opportunity to build a life based on my own choices rather than someone else's lies. I was grateful for that gift, even if he'd never intended to give it. For the first time in years, I was excited about what came next. 2 years later, I stood in the offices of Rocky Mountain Family Services, holding a thick folder of adoption paperwork and feeling my heart pound with anticipation. The social worker, Mrs. Chun, smiled at me across her desk with the kind of warmth that immediately put nervous prospective parents at ease. Sarah, everything looks perfect. Your home study was exemplary, your financial situation is stable, and your references couldn't speak more highly of you. I think we have a wonderful match for you. The baby fund money, the money David had stolen, and I'd fought so hard to recover, had been sitting in a savings account for 2 years, earning interest and waiting for its original purpose. When I'd finally decided I was ready to become a mother, adoption felt like the right path forward. I wanted to give a home to a child who needed one, rather than focusing on creating new life. Tell me about her, I said, trying to keep my voice. Study. Her name is Sophia. She's 6 months old, born to a teenage mother who made the difficult decision to place her for adoption. Sophia's birth mother specifically requested a single mother who would understand the challenges of raising a child independently. Mrs. Chun showed me a photograph and my breath caught. Sophia was beautiful dark hair, bright eyes, and a smile that, even in a photograph, seemed to radiate joy. She was wearing a pink dress and reaching toward the camera as if she wanted to grab the world and explore it. She's perfect, I whispered. The birth mother would like to meet you before making her final decision. Are you comfortable with that? Of course. An hour later, I was sitting in a quiet conference room with Maria, Sophia's birth mother. She was 17, poised beyond her years, and clearly struggling with the weight of the decision she was making. Ms. Mitchell, she said, Mrs. Chun told me about your situation, about your divorce and how you've rebuilt your life. I want Sophia to have a mother who's strong, who can handle whatever life throws at her. I can promise you that I'll love her unconditionally and give her every opportunity I can. Mrs. Chun also said you're studying to become a family therapist. Yes, I finish my master's degree next month, and then I'll be working with families and children who are dealing with trauma or difficult transitions. Maria nodded thoughtfully. I want Sophia to grow up understanding that families come in all different forms, that love is what matters, not how traditional the setup is. We talked for another hour about my plans for Sophia's future, my support system, my financial stability. Maria asked thoughtful questions about childcare, education, and how I plan to balance work and motherhood. By the end of our conversation, I could see she'd made her decision. I want Sophia to be your daughter, she said simply. I want her to grow up with someone who understands that life doesn't always go according to plan, but that doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. 3 weeks later, I was back in the family services office, this time to finalize the adoption. Sophia was in my arms, gurgling happily and grabbing at everything within reach. She'd adjusted to living with me remarkably, quickly, as if she'd always belonged there. Jenny was there as my witness, crying happy tears as I signed the final paperwork. David's parents were there too. They'd become surrogate grandparents to Sophia, eager to shower love on a child who would appreciate it. Sarah, Mrs. Mitchell said, holding Sophia while I finished the legal documents. This little girl is so lucky to have you as her mother. I'm the lucky one, I replied, watching Sophia babble contentedly in the arms of her new grandmother Dot as I carried Sophia out of the family services building. I thought about the journey that had brought us together. 3 years ago, I'd been devastated by the discovery that my baby fund was gone, that my dreams of motherhood had been stolen and given to someone else. I'd felt like my future had been destroyed, like I'd never recover from the betrayal. Instead, that betrayal had led me to become someone stronger, more independent, more capable of providing the kind of stable, loving home Sophia needed. The money David had stolen and I'd fought to recover was now fulfilling its original purpose, just not in the way I'd originally imagined. Sophia's nursery was decorated in soft yellows and greens, with books lining the shelves and educational toys scattered around the room. The crib was the same convertible model I bookmarked years ago when I thought I'd be furnishing a nursery with David, but this version was better chosen by me alone. Paid for with money I'd earned through my own strength and determination. My new career was flourishing. Working with families in crisis had taught me that resilience was more common than people realized, that most people were stronger than they knew when faced with impossible situations. I specialized in helping women who experienced financial abuse or manipulation, using my own story to help them understand that recovery was possible. David's life had followed a very different trajectory. According to Jessica, he'd struggled to meet his child support obligations while also paying his settlement debt to me. He'd been forced to move back in with his parents temporarily, a humbling experience that had apparently taught him nothing about accountability. He still thinks everyone else is to blame for his problems, Jessica had told me during one of our occasional conversations. He's angry that you destroyed his life, angry that his parents turned against him, angry that I won't just forgive and forget everything that happened. How's Emma doing? She's wonderful. Smart and funny and absolutely fearless. She loves her grandparents, and she's starting to understand that her daddy made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean she's not loved. Jessica had rebuilt her life. 2, going back to school and working toward a nursing degree. She'd moved into a modest apartment she could afford on her own, determined never again to depend on someone else's possibly stolen money. We'd become unlikely friends, bonded by our shared experience of David's manipulation. The trust fund I'd established for Emma was now worth over $15,000, growing steadily and waiting for her to turn 18. I'd also started a similar fund for Sophia, determined that both girls would have opportunities their parents. Choices hadn't compromised. On Sophia's first Mother's Day with me, I sat in our living room watching her play with blocks and marveling at how perfectly she fit into the life I'd built. She was crawling now, pulling herself up on furniture, and saying, "Mama," with increasing frequency and enthusiasm. Jenny stopped by with flowers and takeout brunch, continuing a tradition we'd started when I was newly divorced and needed constant support. But now the gatherings were celebrations rather than survival strategies. "She's getting so big," Jenny marveled, watching Sophia stack blocks with intense concentration. "She's incredible. Smart and determined and absolutely fearless, just like her mother." "I hope so. I want her to grow up knowing that she can handle whatever life throws at her, that she doesn't need anyone else to rescue her or complete her." "What will you tell her about her adoption story when she's older?" "The truth, that her birth mother loved her enough to choose the best possible life for her, and that sometimes the most beautiful families are created through choice rather than biology." As evening approached and Jenny left, I sat in Sophia's nursery for her bedtime routine. She was sleepy and content, reaching up to touch my face as I read her favorite picture book. The room was quiet except for the sound of her breathing and the distant hum of city traffic. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over when I discovered David's betrayal. I'd believed that my dreams of motherhood were destroyed, that my future was ruined, that I'd never recover from the devastation. Instead, that devastation had led me to become the person Sophia needed me to be. Strong enough to fight for justice, independent enough to build a stable home, wise enough to recognize that love comes in many forms and families are created through commitment rather than just biology. As I tucked Sophia into her crib and watched her drift off to sleep, I realized that David had actually given me a gift, though he'd never intended to. By destroying the life I'd planned, he'd forced me to build something better. By stealing my dreams, he taught me to dream bigger. Sophia stirred in her sleep and smiled, and I knew that every moment of pain and struggle had been worth this perfect peace. The baby fund had finally fulfilled its purpose, not in the way I'd originally imagined, but in the way that turned out to be exactly right. The future stretched ahead of us, full of possibilities neither David nor Jessica nor anyone else could steal. It was ours to build together, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one perfect moment at a time. And this time, I knew exactly how precious and fragile and worth protecting that future really was.